Welcome to another exciting episode of Submission Radio. It's December 14th, and your Christmas Carol team is here. Dennis Crowder, Kasper Ozolowski, and a crazy weekend of fights, Kasper. So much happened over the weekend.
Yeah, the Christmas Carol team, we will not be doing any singing on the episode, but we do come bearing some Christmas presents. We've got a few big guests on the show. We have none other than Ben Askren. He's going to be chatting to us. We've got TJ Dillashaw, and we've obviously got pro wrestling and MMA legend Ken Shamrock. We're going to be chatting to all three of those guys. We've got a big show, and of course, we're going to be chatting about UFC on Fox 13 and the Ultimate Fighter 20 finale. We got a really big show this week.
That's right. Now, you guys might be listening to us on SoundCloud. That's something new and fun that we've implemented. So just to let everybody know that's listening to the show on Stitcher, TuneIn, or YouTube, or iTunes, we are now available on SoundCloud. And if that's something that you prefer listening, to your shows through, you can now do that to Submission Radio. Also, on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Submission Radio AU, you could check out an interview with CB Dollaway. Now, I don't think this interview got enough attention, Cass. CB really shows us a different side of himself and talks about his confidence going into his fight with Machida, and his belief and his plans to finish Machida and knock him out. So you guys have to check that interview out. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, CB definitely says a lot of interesting things, a few gripes. It talks about road rage, a lot of interesting things in that interview. But as far as this show, we've got a lot to talk about. So we're going to cut to our first guest. Dennis is going to intro him in just a second. We've got obviously... He's basically in between training sessions, so we've got a really limited amount of time. But our first guest is joining us. Dennis, I think we're ready to hear who it is.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next guest is making his first appearance on Submission Radio. He is the current ONE FC welterweight champion, former Bellator welterweight champion, and a decorated wrestler. Ben Askren, welcome to Submission Radio.
Thanks for having me, guys. I've never done a show in Australia, so it's nice to get my name out there.
Well, you know what? We feel honored that we're your first. This is just as awesome for us. Now, before we get into the MMA, just quickly, Ben, let's talk disc golf. We hear that you were at one point the 9th in the amateur championships of the world. Tell us about disc golf. Is it similar to Froth from Seinfeld?
Oh, man. I don't know what they did on Seinfeld, but the disc golf, they just like a smaller Frisbee. It's harder, and it's harder to throw. But, man, it's spreading all over the world. It's a newer sport, and it's a very fun hobby for me to have.
Have you ever had one of those things where in a tournament and you throw the Frisbee and it goes really high and then it comes back to you and you're like, damn, that was a terrible throw?
Not for years and years and years.
You must teach us.
Yeah, that's me and Kasper almost every weekend. Now, Ben, it's almost a week out from UFC 181 where you were in Anthony Pettis' corner for the title fight. You must be happy with Anthony's exciting performance against Gilbert.
Yeah, exactly. He did really well. Honestly, I practice with the guy, and I practice with a lot of high-level people, and I kind of know where he's at. And honestly, I kind of expected the performance he had, so it was exciting to see him fulfill kind of what I thought he was going to do, and he went out there and executed the game plan perfectly.
You know, Anthony's won his last couple of fights through submission victories. As someone who works out with him at, tell us about a little bit about his evolution, his grappling just over the last few years, and have fans been, focused on his striking game to notice how great he is at grappling?
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest things I think Anthony does really well is he transitions into everything, from wrestling to striking to grappling. It's not like separate things to Anthony. It's all just one big thing, right? And so his transitions from other stuff, and so when people are worried about his strikes, that's when his submissions are open. And, he's been able to stop those takedowns, so he's been able to put himself in a little better position. And then obviously he softens everyone up with the strikes. I mean, Gilbert took a lot of really hard strikes before that submission, so it was almost it's like it all works together. It really meshes for Anthony. I think he's one of the most successful people on the planet right now in his transition game. Just the way he chains moves together and different facets of MMA.
Now, Ben, you're obviously, one of the best welterweights in the world and a welterweight champion yourself. We're just wondering, did you take a moment to watch the Lawler versus Hendricks fight? And who do you think won that fight? And to follow up with that, do you think that Robbie Lawler will be the new long-term UFC welterweight champion now?
Well, I actually didn't get to watch it live. I had to catch a red-eye flight for Anthony's fight because I had some stuff going on back in Wisconsin the next day. So once Anthony was done, I said the congrats. We went and hung out in the locker room for a few minutes, and then I hit the road. So I did get to watch it Tuesday night, and I would have scored a 3-2 for Hendricks. That was my feeling, and I don't like Hendricks, so it's not like I'm giving it to him because I like him. That's just how I would have scored it, how I thought I saw the fight going. Obviously, if it's like ONE FC where you score the fight as a whole, after the fight, I think I'd give it to Lawler, but that's not the way North American MMA is scored.
Well, exactly. Obviously, ONE FC, it's a different scoring system. You get scored for the whole fight. Just before we talk about that, you mentioned you don't like Hendricks. Why don't you like Johny Hendricks?
Man, we've kind of had a long-term rivalry since high school, went to opposing colleges for wrestling, and he's just not a very likable person in general.
Some people have some comments about him. And, just finally finishing off with the questions about UFC 181, just quickly wanting to touch on your thoughts about the CM Punk signing. Obviously, everybody had, an interesting reaction to it. It was certainly unexpected. What did you think when you found out Punk was going to be a part of the UFC?
Well, I had been hearing rumors on Twitter about that happening, but for it to actually happen, it was kind of bizarre because when you think about it, the UFC in its inception was a spectacle, right? They brought all these people together, and no one knew it was going to happen, and people tuned in because of that fact. But since then, it's went from spectacle to sport, where we have real legitimate competitors. They know what they're doing. Everyone's a good, solid fighter, and so it's kind of turned into a sport, right, where it was really a spectacle. And now UFC, who is the leader, obviously is trying to go more mainstream. But now it's almost like they're going back to spectacle because you can't really expect that a 36-year-old man who's got no combat sports experience is going to come into the UFC and be effective. I mean, it's simply to sell pay-per-views.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, when Brock came in a few years ago, there was a big MMA boom and pay-per-view numbers did great. And if you look at the numbers for, say, the UFC, I mean, they're not doing that great. Do you think maybe Punk signing could be a good thing for the sport and bring another boom?
Well, I don't think so because Brock could be competitive because of his wrestling background. He was able to be in a good fight. Every fight he was in was you thought he could win, right? And the same can't be said for CM Punk. So, who can they match him up with that people are actually going to be convinced he can win the fight? There's not a lot of those fights for him. So, honestly, I see him maybe doing 1 or 2 big fights tops and then being out of it. And maybe it'll give a momentary bump, but not a big one and not a long-term one.
Now, Ben, let's. Oh, sorry, Cass. I didn't mean to interrupt. Do you have something you want to say?
No. Sorry. You go.
Okay. Yep. Now, Ben, let's move on to you because we do have a limited amount of time. For a while, people have criticized you for not finishing your fights. However, in your last fights, you've had a lot of TKOs and submissions. Your fight especially was impressive when you won the ONE FC welterweight championship and destroyed veteran Suzuki. What do you attribute these finishes to, and did you change something specifically in your training recently?
No, it was just time. I came into the sport as a rookie. I won the Bellator title when I had 18 months of fighting experience under my belt. So the jiu-jitsu and the striking weren't things that came naturally to me because I'd never done them before in my life. So it just took time, and people were they thought because I was a Bellator champ I had well-rounded skills and stuff, but it took time to build those other skills, and now I've been in a great camp at Duke's for getting close to 3.5 years. So now, now I feel like I'm a well-skilled mixed martial artist, and it's been showing in my last fights. I mean, I've really been dominant in my last 4 fights, finished every one of them, and the outcome has never been in question.
Dominant's a pretty big understatement. Now, you are obviously one of the best, if not the best, welterweights in the world, and you're not in the UFC. One of the other guys that's sort of in a similar boat is John Fitch. Now, he recently expressed interest in fighting you on the MMA Hour, and he said that he'd be open to going over to Asia where ONE FC is based. What do you think about a possible fight against John Fitch? Would you be interested?
Yeah, I'll beat up anyone at any time. I always tell people my job is to be a fighter. It means to step in the cage and beat up who's ever across from me. And my manager's job is to book those fights. So I will beat up who's ever in the cage across from me. And if it so happens to be John Fitch, I mean, he knows that's not a wise decision. He knows it's a terrible decision on his part. So if he's dumb enough to make that decision, feel free, John.
And, I guess a lot of people want to see that fight because both of you are such great grapplers. But just quickly touching on it, what do you think would be an advantage that you'd have over John in that fight if it does happen?
I'm better in every single area. I'm a better wrestler. I'm a better grappler. I'm a better striker. I'm stronger, I'm younger, I'm faster. You pick it.
Now, you seem pretty sort of easygoing in terms of who you want to fight. I'm not sure what your current contract is with ONE FC, but would it be possible to see you maybe facing World Series of Fighting's welterweight champion Rousimar Palhares, and you possibly claiming another world title?
Yeah, that's another one. Like I said, I'm going to fight who's across the cage from me. So, if that were to happen, he were to come over, let's do it. At this point in my career, I'm fairly indifferent to who I fight. If I'm going to claim to be the best fighter in the world, I got to accept all challengers.
Now, Ben, you said many times that it's not a must for you to fight in the UFC in your career, and you've already, obviously, you're one of the best in the world. Just wondering, what's your motivation to keep fighting? What drives you in the sport? And also, the UFC move, is it something that you just don't care about at this point? It's something that you're not interested any longer?
Yeah, I would like to fight for the number one spot in the world, which would be a lot easier if I was over in that organization. But obviously, there's a lot of politics and other things that going into making that happen. It's not like the Wrestling World Championships where you can, go to the U.S. Nationals, win your national tournament, and then go to the Worlds, and you win the Worlds, and you're the world champion, right? It's not that easy. So, at this point, I'm just going to fight who's in front of me, like I said multiple times. And my management and all the politics, hopefully they'll eventually take care of themselves.
Sure. Now, we've got a few fan questions for you, Ben. We told the fans to come on the show, so we'll get a few of those out. Adamant wants to know, right? You and GSP, it's been a matchup talking about for ages. He wants to know, how would you deal with GSP's stalling and lay and pray tactics?
Well, no one. I haven't been held down in ever. Never, ever have I been held down. So I don't think that's something I would have to worry about at all in that fight.
Forrest Kreis has a question for you, Ben. He wants to know, could you make 155, and would that be a possibility for you in the future if you wanted to do that?
No, I can't make 155. I wrestled 163 in the Olympics, and that was probably the bare bottom for me. I was on a diet for a whole year for that, and really the weight cut was still hard, and so I can't really imagine going down another 8 pounds beyond 163.
What about middleweight, Ben? Would you ever consider, if you clean out the welterweight division, would you ever go to middleweight?
I guess I'm not 100% opposed to it. I figure I might as well just fight everyone and prove them the best welterweight first, and then worry about those things later.
Sure. Now, we're going to do something called the Submission Raider Tap-Out Round. Is how we round out all interviews. Just a bunch of fun questions, and basically we'll rattle them off. You answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Yep, let's do it.
Have you ever had any urges about having another crack at the Olympics?
No.
Finish this sentence, Ben. People don't know that I
don't know. I'm a pretty open book. I tell everyone everything I do. So, I can't think of a good one right off the bat.
That's a good point. We're going to have to wait till the Ben Askren book comes out, and then we find out some secrets.
Yeah.
Describe Duke Roufus in one word.
Ooh. Intense.
Intense. Sounds like a good MMA coach. Now, we saw some more pictures of you back in college with an awesome, huge afro. Any chance of you bringing it back in 2015, really growing it out?
No, man. I don't know how I grew it for that long. It's just like when it gets long now, it drives me crazy and I have to cut it.
Okay. Now, give us your go-to submission in training.
Say arm triangle.
Here's another question. Would you be interested in participating in Meta Morris? And if so, who would your dream opponent be?
Yeah, I've said a bunch of times on Twitter I would do that, and same thing. I'll take on any comers. Let's say GSP or Johny Hendricks to make it fun.
All right, awesome. Now that the cage has been legalized in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, are there any plans that you know of about ONE FC coming down to Australia and you possibly fighting down here?
That would be sweet. I got a friend over there in Newcastle, Australia. I want to come see. So I told ONE FC that. They need to go to Australia, but I think they're being very strategic about their expansion opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully one day we get to see you and Rob Lazita coming here and obviously fighting. Now, Ben, we haven't seen you. Well, last question, Ben. We haven't seen you fighting since August. How soon can we expect Ben Askren back?
I'm hoping to fight in February. So that's kind of what ONE FC's hinted at, and that's what I'm hoping for.
Awesome. Well, guys, don't forget to follow Ben Askren on Twitter at Ben Askren. It's been a pleasure having you on the show, and I hopefully get to chat to you soon, Ben.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Hey, this is Alistair Overeem, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, it is our great pleasure to have our next on. He is a current UFC champion. To be more specific, he is the Bantamweight UFC champion of the world. He is none other than TJ Dillashaw, and he's back on Submission Radio today. TJ, welcome back to Submission Radio. How are you?
Doing good. It's always a pleasure to be on. Thank you.
We always love having you on. It's been a long time since we've had you on. In fact, the last time you were on the show, it was actually around the time that the first Renan Barao fight was announced, before you were champion. A lot's changed, obviously. You've become champion since then. I guess the biggest question is, since winning the title to become champion, what's the biggest significant change in your life?
Just how busy I am. I'm always on the road doing appearances and seminars and going to all the fights and doing all the UFC PR. Just a lot more busy.
Now, everybody knows you defended your title once in a performance of the night fashion. We're already hearing that, you've been talking about possibly wanting to fight one of the pound-for-pound greats, Jose Aldo. Tell us, what was your motivation for, saying that you'd want to fight Aldo?
That's me. I was on TAM Radio, TeamAlphaMaleRadio.com, and we have our own podcast. And it was after Chad Mendez's fight. We were talking about the fight and how close it was, and Aldo as a champion. And I just believe that I could beat the guy. Watching his style is very similar to Barao's, and I feel like I have the right style to beat him. And it's just me, displaying my confidence in that. I mean, obviously, I know I need to hold my belt, for a few more fights and look dominant, run through Dominick Cruz, and and make sure I'm dominant at 135 before I even think about going to a different weight class and trying to capture another belt. But once I got the UFC belt, I had to set new goals, and that was maybe being the first one to have two belts at the same time. And looking at Aldo fighting, I just know that I can beat him.
It's pretty awesome that, obviously, like Dennis mentioned, you're like a fresh champion, and already you're looking at things like that, and you've already got those kind of goals. What do you see as your biggest strengths and assets against Jose Aldo?
Oh, my footwork and my style of fighting. I have a certain style that I've worked on for beating Renan Barao, and I feel like it'd be very effective against Jose Aldo. I think almost even, I wouldn't say easier. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's a really, really, really tough fight. Yeah. But, Barao, in my mind, Aldo, in my mind, is a very predictable fighter. He does the same things every time he comes out and fights. And, I just have the belief of being able to beat him, and that'll take you a long way.
TJ, you sound like you have a lot of respect for Aldo, and I think it's something that's lost these days. A lot of people aren't giving Aldo the respect that he deserves. You know Aldo better than anyone, because a lot of people in your camp have fought him before. Tell us, what do you think about Aldo as champion? Because obviously, I don't think as many people give him respect that he really deserves.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a very dangerous opponent and very technically structurally sound. He doesn't do anything wrong. He's never in bad position. He's always got his hands up. He's throwing the technique perfectly. He's a great champion. He's obviously on the pound-for-pound list in the right spots. So I have a lot of respect, not only for Barao, but for that whole camp. Everything that Palhares has done with all of his guys there. Barao was an amazing champion as well. There's no lack of respect for those guys. And I've looked up to what they've done, what the history they've already done. You can't take that away from them.
Sure. Now, after the Joe Soto fight, you had the corrective surgery for your elbow. I believe you had bursitis. We heard that you were running almost a month ago. How's the body and how's the elbow now?
It's been really good. I had surgery about 5 weeks ago. It's healing up nice, and I'm starting to get back into shape and hit mitts. I haven't been able to do any grappling or go live yet, just because of the fact that, I want to make sure it heals up right. I don't want to ruin the surgery that I just got. So I'm taking the right precautions of coming back the right way and getting in shape before I get in there and start going live, so I don't get hurt and have a healthy camp for Dominick Cruz. So yeah, everything's going really, really well.
Well, speaking of Dominick Cruz, which is going to be another very, very exciting fight. Before we talk about that fight, we just want to get your opinion. What did you think of Cruz's dominant return to the octagon? What did you think of his performance?
Not so much just technique-based, but I was more impressed with he was finally aggressive. I've always seen Dominick Cruz fight, and he's kind of on the outside, pitter-pattering, and moving around, and he's just winning fights by points. This might be his first finish ever, and for it to finally come this far in his career, and to someone like Muzagaki, it's impressive. It's good for him that he's finally getting that killer instinct, but I'm also going to use that against him. He's going to switch his style up. He's going to get a little too aggressive, I think, and he's going to wear himself out, and my cardio is going to last forever.
He had a few things to say about Team Alpha Male after his big win. Maybe emotions were still running through his body. What did you think when you heard those comments?
Me and Dominick Cruz have always had a respectful relationship. Him and Uriah have had words and don't like each other, and that's where that all comes from. It's him just kind of, putting it back in Uriah's face that he's out there winning and looking good, and it's nothing but good for me because of the fact that it's going to still fight. He's going to talk all this crap and be as confident as he wants to be, but really it's just going to make it harder on himself when he loses. It's going to put more pressure on him when he steps and knocks it out against me. And, it's going to do nothing but drive the numbers up, and it is going to be a great fight. I've never talked to anybody that wasn't excited about this fight. So, like I said, it's just selling it big time.
And when it happens, it's going to be absolutely awesome. You and Dominic are always being compared to each other in terms of styles, and people say you have similar footwork. What would you say that you do better than Dominic?
I knock people out. I finish fights. I'm aggressive. I'm coming at you. There's never one point in the time where you can let your guard down, because if you do, you're going to get knocked out. And, with Dominick Cruz, he's a lot less dangerous. He doesn't have the power behind his punches because he doesn't settle his feet. He's always dipping out of the way and throwing his punches. And when you're doing that, you can't deliver any power behind your punches. Yeah, sure, is it flashy and you score a lot of points? Yeah, but I can do the exact same thing, but then bring some power with it and be a little bit lethal and dangerous. I think my combos are more technical. I stay a little bit tighter than he does, and I feel like my grappling's a whole lot better than his. He uses anti-jiu-jitsu. He gets the takedowns to score points. I'm trying to take you down to finish you. I'm going to stay on top of him. I'm going to leech onto him, and I just feel I'm a whole lot more dangerous than he is in every aspect of MMA.
Dominic was obviously champion before he was stripped of the title due to inactivity, and obviously you've done such a great job as the UFC champion, but is there any part of you that feels like your journey to being a champion is incomplete until you beat Dominick Cruz? Like, to be the undisputed champ, you have to go through Cruz?
Not necessarily. I've always wanted to fight Cruz because of the fact he was the champion when I got in the weight class. But, no, I definitely feel like I've held my own and in great fashion. The fact that the way I beat Barao and defended my belt, to me, it was good enough to secure me being the best in the world. And I really do believe I'm way better than Dominick Cruz. So, in my mind, I'm the champion. He's got to come and try to get it. And I'm gonna put him on the back burner, and I'm gonna try to finish his career.
Sure. And, you mentioned Barao. Obviously, you guys, I wouldn't say you had the rematch. It was obviously set up. Now, you guys were very competitive up until that point and had this organic rivalry. When he didn't make weight, he obviously didn't get paid and didn't get to the fight for the strap. I'm just curious, on a sort of personal level, did you feel sorry for him at all that happened? Or was it more like, well, you didn't prepare properly, it is what it is?
I was a little more pissed off and feeling sorry for him, I didn't really agree with the rematch to begin with. He got dominated. He got his butt kicked, and he didn't have an answer for it. And so I didn't even feel like he deserved the rematch. But obviously that was the big fight. That was a fight everyone wanted to see and see if it would happen again. I gave him his shot, and I said, like, whatever, you bring whoever you want to me, I'm going to fight him. That's just the personality I have in fighting. And, I feel if he's never once ever missed weight in all of the years of him fighting, and then all of a sudden he decides to miss weight, less than 24 hours before we're going to fight, or 24 hours before we're going to fight. It's just kind of, I just don't think he wanted it. This is professional. This is how you make your money. This is your name. This is your legacy, and you're going to miss weight. To me, it doesn't seem like it was just a fluke thing. I don't think he wanted to fight me. I think his coaches wanted it more than he did.
Now, TJ, we're pretty excited to see you in the new Reebok uniforms, coming out very soon. Tell us, what did you think when you found out about the new Reebok partnership with the UFC? And also, there's been some concerns about fighters losing sponsors, and it's not the same monetarily for them. Just wondering, with the Reebok sponsorship, is that something you're happy about?
I am. I'm happy about it because of the fact that it's just going to look a little bit more professional when we're in the cage. Everyone's going to be wearing Reebok. We won't be having these just off the wall sponsors, and you're not gonna have dynamic fastener everywhere. You're gonna have clean looking cut Reebok gear, and I feel like it takes the stress off of me of having to trying to find that apparel sponsor before I have my fight, and it's just a set in stone sponsorship, and who knows what the pay is going to be? I have no idea, and hopefully it's the same, if not better. It's a big company, and it just makes our sport a little more professional, kind of like boxing or kind of like football and basketball and baseball. We're all going to be wearing somewhat close to the same uniform with your own personal sponsors on there as well. So I think it's a positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Fingers crossed. Now, TJ, before we jump to the submission radio tap out round to wrap things up, I just want to ask you a few fan questions. A fan sent in some questions for you. First one is from the real Brian. TJ, you mentioned in past interviews how you hope Cub Swanson beats Edgar and has a title shot. Now the Cubs lost his title shot. A lot of debate about who should get the next shot. Many people say it should be Edgar, while it looks like Conor McGregor may get it if he beats Seaver. What are your thoughts on McGregor getting a shot at Aldo next, and who do you think wins between the two?
Who getting a shot at Aldo next?
Looks like Conor McGregor may get the shot next.
Yeah, I don't agree with Conor McGregor getting a title shot, especially after beating Dennis Seaver if he does. Why is that deserving of a title shot? Dennis Seaver is not on the way up. He's not up there looking for a title shot himself. Why not put Conor McGregor versus Frankie Edgar? Why not put Conor McGregor against Chad Mendez or Lamas, or one of those top guys that's actually pushing for the belt? Just because he has a hype behind him, he can talk big game, and he's going to sell tickets. I just don't think it's right to surpass the Frankie Edgars, the guys that can beat Conor McGregor. I think Frankie Edgar would destroy Conor McGregor. Chad Mendez would destroy Conor McGregor. We haven't seen Conor McGregor fight a wrestler or a top name. He beat Poirier with a fluke punch to the back of the head in my mind, and I was excited to see that fight go down. I wanted to see it go longer. Do I think Conor McGregor is a great fighter? Yes, he's awesome. He's really good. He's confident. He has great stand-up, and he's tricky. But I just don't feel like he's deserved it yet. I don't think he should surpass those guys in the shot. And if he does, the thing is, though, if he does fight Aldo, he does have a chance because it's going to be a stand-up battle, and Aldo doesn't have that threatening takedown skills and going to try to tap you out or ground and pound you. So it's tough. I don't think he should get the title fight because he doesn't deserve it, but it's going to be a close fight in my mind.
Now, we got the next question here from Blue Snoops. He wants to know, TJ, if you beat Cruz, how long before you'd be looking at a possible Dodson rematch?
I feel it's so funny to hear those questions because, for one, Dodson hasn't even fought at 35 other than our Ultimate Fighter finale. I don't feel like he gets a rematch until he can establish himself at the weight class. He's not even the champion at 125. Why should he get to fight me? If he wants to fight me, prove that he can be good and beat some of the top 5 guys in the weight class, which I don't think he can. So unless he can prove that, I would love to fight the guy again, but again, that's another situation where he's just not deserving of a rematch.
Absolutely. Now, TJ, we're going to wrap up the interview with the submission-rated tap-out round. We did it a while ago. I'm not sure if you remember. Basically, we fire out a bunch of fun questions at you, and you answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Has Martin Kampmann tried to hustle you out of some dollars in poker yet?
Has who?
Martin Kampmann.
Oh, he has. He's taken me I've been to a poker tournament with him. He wants me to always play against him. He's a great poker player, so it's just not fair. But I've had some fun playing some poker with him.
TJ, when Team Alpha Male does Christmas carols, which ones are at the top of the list?
I think it's the Jingle Bells. But then we do the one where it's Batman smells and that whole good deal. We're immature and like the humorous jokes.
Somewhere there's a viral YouTube video out of this. Now, on your Instagram, which is TJ Dillashaw, there was a picture with you and a banana saying that you bought it for Kampmann and that it was the most expensive banana. To paint a picture for those who haven't seen your Instagram, it's basically you. You look like you were at a poker tourney and the banana was on a platter.
Yep.
What's the story with that?
Yeah.
Is a single banana peel?
That's the poker tournament that came and took me to up in Reno, and we're at the same table in this poker tournament just by random draw, and he actually goes out before me, but he ordered a banana to eat at the table, and they bring it to him. It's like a $5 banana, and they bring it to him on a platter, which is just absurd, Yeah. It's like they had to cook it or prepare it whatsoever, and so he loses, and they still bring the banana to the table, and I just claimed it. I didn't know if he paid for it or not, but they bring it to me. And then they bring me a $5 bill, which I thought was ridiculous. So I had to post it on Instagram.
The champ needs his potassium.
Now, TJ, in one of the
exactly.
UFC, I don't know if you remember, but in one of the UFC embeddeds, you had to borrow your wife's car because yours was too messy. Are we right to assume that TJ Dillashaw, much like us, doesn't like to clean his car very often?
Oh, man, my car's a locker room. I got sweaty clothes in there. I got my stinky gloves. You know, it's one of those things where my wife doesn't even want to ride in my vehicle because it's so gross.
Good.
But then, you know, I'll go and randomly clean it. But I'm so focused on getting to the gym and training. That's the last thing on my mind is cleaning my car.
Good. If the champ treats his car like that, then we can as well. Now, we spoke to Joseph Benavidez, I think, 2 weeks ago, who mentioned how much of a food whore he is, or he likes to be between fights. Are you the same, or is your diet pretty strict between fights?
No, usually his diet's horrible between not between fights, but after his fight, give him a good 3 weeks to a month of eating whatever he wants, everything in sight. I don't even think he drinks water within those 3 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, he's drinking milkshakes and sodas, all things that he hasn't been able to eat since he's been cut into 25s. But just recently, he's gotten more serious with his diet on the off season. He's doing a lot better. He's not blowing up to 150. You know, he's doing a good job of staying in the 40s and staying lean. But we used to call him the beefcake because he gets so big in between his fights. You know, he would lose all muscle definition and eat way too much food and just kind of eat just the grossest things possible just because he knows he can.
The question though was, what about you? Like, are you the same, or are you more strict with your diet?
I'm pretty strict. I mean, obviously, I do my fair share eating, you know, a couple of weeks after the fight, but I kind of spread out my junk food. You know, I don't go on a binge. I just feel like it's a lot easier on my body with the next weight cut if I stay somewhat close to my diet. And I'm one of those guys that likes to eat good food. You know, I'll gorge on eating good stuff. And if you do that, it's not as bad on your body. You know, I don't have a sweet tooth. I don't eat a bunch of chocolate. You know, it's more of just eating mass amounts of good food.
Let's change topics for a second. You got married in June this year. It's always been 6 months. So give the listeners one marriage tip in case they ever decide to tie the knot.
The wife is always right. Happy wife, happy life.
Yeah, that's the truth. Now, TJ, if you had to pick one genre of music to listen to for the rest of your life, what would it be?
That's a tough one because I like listening to everything. But I'm a huge Chili Peppers fan. I probably stick to that kind of genre. Do some rock, you know, Yeah, I probably have to stay there. It'd be tough though. That's a tough one. To only listen to one genre of music for the rest of your life, that'd be tough.
TJ, you took a photo with Jeremy Piven at UFC 181. Did you get a chance to discuss any of your favorite Entourage Ari Gold moments with him?
I tried not to, even though I wanted to, because I'm sure he gets it all the time. You know, I just kind of wanted to treat him as the actor he is and not just the movies he's been in. You know, he was a really cool, down-to-earth guy and a huge MMA fan. He knew a lot about me and a lot about the sport, and I think that's one of the coolest things when you get to meet people like that. I actually got to meet Anthony Kiedis, too, at a fight in San Jose, and I was just really surprised at how big a fan he was of mine and fighting in general, and that's a really cool feeling.
Awesome. Now, last time we spoke to you, TJ, you clarified that you are, in fact, not the Viper and that it is not your nickname. We still see journalists using the Viper in articles. Is this still the case that you're not the Viper, or have you just given up and started using it because it's stuck?
No, I've never used it, and I actually don't like it. You know, my friends started giving me crap when I got off Ultimate Fighter, and I don't know how, but someone gave me a nickname on Viper, on Sherdog as a Viper, and so they were giving me crap about it. So it's always just kind of bugged me when I hear it. Yeah. You know, and maybe that's why it stuck around, because I let it bother me. But it's definitely not my nickname.
Now, TJ, I don't know if you've heard about this or not, but one of the biggest UFC events of all time is being planned for Etihad Stadium in November in Melbourne. If everything goes to plan, would that be a card that you'd be interested in fighting on? And if so, could you please give us a dream opponent that you'd like to face in front of the sold-out 56,000-seat stadium in Melbourne?
I would love to fight in Melbourne. It'd be awesome. You know, I've been there. I would taught some seminars out there when Joseph fought out in Sydney. And it's a really cool place. You know, I'd love to come out and fight out there. Opponent-wise, you know, I don't know who'd be next after Cruz. It all depends on what goes down and who wins their fights. My dream opponent is just the number one contender. You know, I like to beat the best that's ready in line. I know it'd be even cooler if I actually got to fight Aldo at 45. That'd be sweet. Since we talked about it, that'd be an awesome matchup for me.
Well, we need 56,000 people there, so that'd definitely be a matchup that'd get people out of their houses. Just a few more questions, TJ. Since becoming champion, how many boats and or water vessels have you bought? Choose from the following: 18, 19, or 27.
Definitely 27.
Excellent.
I have just 27. They're all Malibu boats too.
Oh,
I have a
nice.
whole fleet of them. Yeah.
TJ, if you had a book written about your life, what would the title be?
That's tough. Let's go with the same title as my documentary. Let's go Fearless.
Fearless? I like it. Now, TJ, here's another one for you. What would you rather named after you? A McDonald's food item or a font?
Or a font, you said?
Yeah. Like, imagine a billboard and, there's writing and they're like, oh, yeah, that's the Dillashaw, size 193.
Yeah, actually, I would like to go with the font because I feel like it'd be more widely used, And then I don't want to be associated with McDonald's whatsoever. I don't support eating McDonald's at all.
TJ, explain this Lieutenant Dan nickname to us, please.
So when I very first started training with Team Alpha Male, I came into the gym, and I knew nothing about boxing or striking whatsoever. But one of my first practices, first week being there was sparring, and I got into the boxing ring, and I believe I was fighting a kid that his name is Scott McAfee, I believe, or it might have been Joseph Benavidez. I can't recall the exact one it was, but I remember being in the ring, getting beat up, and swinging as hard as I possibly can, and swinging haymakers, getting tagged up, bleeding from my nose, and then just getting so angry that I wasn't doing good enough that I'm yelling at my opponent, yelling at him, telling him to bring it harder, cussing him out kind of deal, just yelling and bringing it as hard as I possibly can. And then when I got done, Uriah told me it reminded me of Lieutenant Dan in the movie Forrest Gump. When he's on the ship, he's on top of the ship, and there's a hellacious storm, and he's just yelling at God, just pissed off, telling him to bring it as hard as he possibly can. And that's where the nickname came from. TJ Lieutenant Dan Dillashaw is what Uriah first started calling me.
Well, we haven't yet heard Bruce Buffer say it. We've taken the liberties. This is the last question, by the way. After the whole Viper debacle, the Submission Radio marketing department has been whisked away from their families at 3 o'clock in the morning, placed in an unmarked van and driven to a factory off the coast of Barbados. And in this ONHS unfriendly workspace, they've come up with 3 nicknames for you to choose from, and you got to pick your favorite one. Are you ready?
Yep.
All right, we've got TJ the Sushi Destroyer Dillashaw. It's the first one.
Okay.
Then we've got Sir Timothy James Dillashaw III. I know your name's Tyler Jeffrey, but still. And then the last one is TJ Killishaw Dillashaw.
You said Killishaw?
Killishaw.
Yeah, I like him. Especially because a lot of guys at the gym call me Killishaw as well, so that works out perfect. I think Killishaw would probably be the best choice, even though I do like the Sushi Destroyer.
Yeah.
Well, guys, that's the Sushi Destroyer / Killishaw. I think it should be replaced in the Wikipedia there, TJ. I think it's time to replace the Viper. Now, guys, you can follow him on Twitter at TJ Dillashaw. And make sure to visit his website, tjdillashaw.com. There's always great things on there as well. TJ, it's been an absolute pleasure in speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining us on Submission Radio. I know all the fans love it.
Oh, no problem. Anytime. You guys are a good radio show.
This is Ben Killaby Saunders, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next guest is a pioneer in MMA. He has crossed over to pro wrestling as well. His name is none other than Ken Shamrock, and he returns today to Submission Radio. Ken, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you for that introduction, and it's always a pleasure to get on and be able to talk about the good old days and do a little reminiscing with the fans.
That's exactly what we love, and I think the fans love it as well. Now, last time we spoke to you was quite a while ago. It was months back. Tell us, Ken, what's been new in your life, and how's the past year been for Ken Shamrock?
Well, I'll tell you what. A lot of things have been changing within the last 10 years. I have really focused on trying to rebrand myself. I went from being, the world's most dangerous man, I don't know how many world champions, probably 7 world titles through wrestling, and through different MMA organizations, just always rose to the top and was able to succeed in everything that I did. But there was this time that it was, I needed to change. I needed to make a change because I couldn't stay that person. And I had to try and develop some businesses and different things around what I have already created. So for the past 10 years, I've really tried to rebrand myself. I tried to stay connected to my fans and try to deliver something to the fans that would still be a part of who I am, a part of my character, a part of what they love seeing, and then turn it into some sort of business in which we could all enjoy together. And probably in the last 6 months, we probably developed 4 different types of business opportunities that I believe within the next probably, I would say, 3 to 4 months, I'm going to be able to announce these different business opportunities and different things that the fans can get involved with to be able to have fun with me again.
You've definitely piqued our interest. You said you needed to change. I'm just curious, Ken, what do you mean by like needed to change, and why? Why did you need to change?
I think what happens a lot of times when athletes come to the end of, their career, I mean, they've been doing it since they were 5 years old or 10, depending on when they picked it up. And it's kind of been, that's just been their thing, and they've always pretty much been good at it. It's been their life. Then there's a time when you do something for that long and it stops. And I think a lot of people don't recognize the different opportunities that you can do from actually doing these things for that long. But what happens is we step away, and then we just think life will continue to keep going as usual. But what happens is the music stops, and you don't hear the people cheering anymore and screaming for your name, and you don't have your buddies around you taking care of you, making sure you're eating right, training right. Hopefully you've kept your family intact, but majority of them have not, because they put their career first, and most of them lose the family and the kids and the connection with the kids. So then when they turn and try to find some sort of stability with that focus or that sturdiness that they would have once they step away from whatever it is they're doing, there's nothing there anymore. Nobody's there to help them through. And so it doesn't just continue on, man. It's a whole nother second part of life you have to live. And people say, well, you could just live off of what you made. Well, a lot of guys blow their money. And, maybe even if they do have money, it still doesn't fill that void of the excitement and the adrenaline and the rush you get from doing these type of things. And so, therefore, you have to find something to fill that void. So I think that that's what happens when you get to the end of your career. The ones that are smart realize that they've got to make a change. They've got to start looking at other things that will help fill them voids, to help fill that empty space that they have, that they're going to have, and be able to fill it with something positive. And, I realized that after maybe a year or 2 years out, I realized that, this is not going to be an easy change. And so I started trying to find the right people, you're just trying to get the right people, surround the right people around you. Sometimes you make mistakes as you're doing that, and you just have to, move on and get somebody else. But I think that is really where you see a lot of these guys turn to drugs and alcohol and women and whatever else they can to fill that emptiness. And I realized that, there was a change that needed to be made. And not to say that I didn't go through my time, because I did. But I realized that, I needed to start thinking of other things that I could do that would make me happy, that would still involve my fans and keep the excitement in my life. And so when I say, having to rebrand yourself or make a change, that's what I'm talking about, is because it just doesn't go and do it by itself. That's why you see a lot of these guys, when they do retire, they just seem unhappy. They get overweight. They just don't seem fired up and happy anymore. They're only 50 years old, man. They're not old. There's a whole other life to live. So when I say make a change, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It sounds like you're doing a lot of smart things. Now, one thing that we covered a while back when you were on our show last time, we spoke to you about Dana White, your relationship, the feud, and we sort of brought up the subject of time healing all and what would have to happen for you guys to sort of make up. Now, I think it was like a day or two later after that interview that I guess a phone call was made and you and Dana squashed the beef. I'm just curious, what happened happened? What motivated you to call Dana, and was it something we said?
Well, I think what happened was there was an incident that happened with a bodyguard. And, of course, since I've been doing some different things with my career and started moving in the direction of doing some protection agency work, all of a sudden I became the expert. I don't know why. I only had a year or two experience into it, but okay, I accepted it. They asked my opinion, and I gave it to them. And I guess Dana White heard of it. He made some comments. They came back to me and told me what Dana had said, and my first instinct was to fire back, go back at him. But I just had spent some time with my mom and started finding myself a little bit, and got recommitted myself back to my Savior. So it just came over me that, you know what, it's time for us to just smash this thing, because I don't even know, sometimes forget why we're even fighting, because I think we both love the same thing. And he's protecting it his way, and I was trying to protect it my way. But the bottom line was that we both love the UFC, and we both want the best for it, and we just have different ways of looking at it. And so I just said, you know what, it's time to squash this. And so they went back, and they said, hey, Dana, guess what Ken said? And, of course, Dana probably thought I was going to say something smart. And he says, Ken wants to squash it. And Dana said, did you really say that? And he said, yeah, man, he said he wants to squash it. So I guess they hung up, and then an hour later, Dana had called me and said, hey, I heard you want to squash this. And I saw the opportunity for us to put aside our differences and move forward, because, like I said, I think the best thing is the fans deserve better than us arguing with each other and fighting over things that are irrelevant. There's better ways to do it, and I think we should show an example to the young fighters and young athletes out there that there's better ways to settle your differences rather than bash each other through the media.
Now, Ken, speaking of making amends, the other day we were checking out your Twitter, which, by the way, guys, is at Shamrock. Ken, make sure you follow him. And there's a photo of you and Tito signing autographs and having a laugh together. Just wondering, how does it feel to be able to have a laugh with Tito after all the things that transpired between you two?
It's like the house being lifted off of you. For so many years that we were going at each other, and a lot of it had to do with me, because I was at the end of my career and I was fighting so hard to hold on. I wanted so hard to be able to compete with him, and it's just physically not possible. I had injuries. I was 39 years old, 40 and 41 when I fought him. And so it just wasn't possible. But mentally, that's what made me such a great fighter and such a great athlete, was that there was no limitations to what I could do as far as my mind and my body was concerned. And so even when those times come, I had recognized that, I could compete with the average fighter, but to a world-class fighter like Tito in his prime, it just wasn't going to happen, And so, a lot of my anger and aggressions to defend myself and to try and get myself where I thought that I could get was really where all that anger came from. And, so it's I'm glad that we were able to put it behind us, because, again, like I said, it goes the same thing back with Dana White. The fans deserve better than that. The fans deserve to have two great athletes shake hands and say, great job. While they're fighting, all bets are off. Go at each other, do what it is to make you get ready or prepared to get in there and whip somebody. I say go for it. Just do whatever you want to do. But when it's over and, you step away, I think that's where you start becoming a role model to these younger kids coming up, that there are right ways to do things and wrong way to do things.
Yeah, and Ken, I can't imagine the two of you talking too much during a heated rivalry, you and Tito. Now that you had the opportunity to just kind of hang out and chat and be in each other's company, what's something that you learned about Tito that maybe surprised you, that you wouldn't have expected?
Yeah, Tito is and again, I know some people that probably on his bad side wouldn't say this, but from what I've experienced and seen around him, because I've been on both sides of it. I've been on the opposite side where you don't like him, and then I've been on the inside where I start to get to know the guy, and I've seen him with his kids and his fiance, and he is a genuine, sweet guy. I mean, literally, the guy has a big heart. And I think that's sometimes hard to see when you're actually in the middle of it. You're on the outside watching a guy prepare to fight, and he gets angry and those things. And I think that's what a lot of people thought of me for a long time until I let everybody in and let them know who I really was. And I think Tito's the same way. I think Tito has a big heart. If you cross him or you try to hurt his family, and that means the fans too, then of course he's going to get angry, and you're going to see the bad side of him.
Now, Ken, just switching topics for a second here, I just want to talk to you about some big news that came out last week with the UFC, and it was the announcement of the new Reebok uniforms for fighters. I was just wondering, as somebody that's an icon in the sport and knows really about how much money fighters are making from sponsors and how important it is for them, what did you think when you heard the news?
Again, I speak my mind, and I don't say anything to try and hurt anybody or to discredit anybody, but I think it's a bad move. I think that you're treading into waters where you're taking away opportunity from managers, from gyms, from fighters. When you start handcuffing them and actually telling them what they have to wear, you're going in some deep waters here where you're going to start getting things that you don't know that are down there, and you start stirring up some stuff that you probably don't need at this point. But, I don't like it. I think, you're basically going in and you're really infringing on these guys. Might have some opportunities, which they're already taking that away when they have to approve it anyways. So a lot of that stuff is happening. I would like to know, what they're giving in return. What are some of the benefits that the opposite, because this is a negotiation, really it should be. I mean, you're not telling a guy, hey, this is what we're going to do, shut up and fight and like it. I don't think that's what they're trying to do, but I think that there should be some opinions and some at least some concerns about what the fighters think about it or what the management thinks about it. Maybe they've done that. I don't know, because I haven't really been paying attention. But again, like I said, I really think that from the outside looking in, and I don't know what's going on the inside, and I could be completely speaking out of turn here, but it just doesn't look good to me.
Now, obviously an icon in MMA, and you've been fighting at the highest level for a really, really long time, but there was always a beginning for you when you fought, before people really got to know you. And I'm just wondering, how much of a difference did sponsors make to you as a fighter? That extra couple of $1,000, how much of a difference did that make to you as a fighter? And do you think that this might affect some of the lower tier fighters who really need that kind of money to sort of get through a training camp?
Well, what I hope is going to happen, and from what I'm hearing and understanding, is that's happening is the guys are getting paid more, and that's kind of what I'm hearing, is that their checks are going to go up. And if that's the case, well, then now we've got a different story here. The guys are making more money, and I'm guaranteed more money, and they're not going to worry about going and getting these sponsors. Then absolutely, because if Reebok or whoever's coming in and they're putting names on these shirts and they're getting big money for it, and they're kicking that back down to the guys that are on the card, hey, that's great. And that's what I heard. That's what I heard they were going to do. So again, if that all happens, I think that's great. And but I'm talking about a guy from the outside looking in. It just doesn't look very good. But again, we don't know everything that's going on that the UFC is doing behind the scenes before we can really make a clear judgment, a real clear call about whether we think it's fair or not, because we don't know everything that's going on or that's going to go on after they make the deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is one of the main things. A lot of the key, I guess, the facts are still missing. Now, something else that we wanted to talk to you about, Ken, there was more big news, UFC 181. You're obviously a guy with a pro wrestling background, and one of your fellow kayfabe brothers recently joined the UFC roster. Of course, we're talking about CM Punk. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on Punk going to the UFC, especially at such a late point in life?
I think it's great. I mean, especially if he's got the ability. He sounds like he's got a great wrestling background, a really good wrestling background. And a guy like that, if they give him a guy that's a top 10 fighter, that's not fair. But if they'll give him, a guy that's, got 1-0 as a pro, or 1-1 as a pro, and start him out right, like they should have done with Brock Lesnar. They should have probably got him guys that didn't have 15 fights, that was an ex-world champion for him to fight on his first or second or third fight. And groom this guy. I think it's tremendous. I mean, a lot of guys are complaining, why is he in there, this and that. Listen, I wouldn't be complaining about why he's in there. I'd be fighting my tail off to get on the undercard or to fight him.
Yeah.
So these guys, some of these guys that are complaining out there, it's like you guys are really not looking at the big picture here. It's about dollars and cents. Yeah. If he can put people in the seats and build this business to a bigger model and be able to put more money into your pocket on the card, why are you getting mad about that? You should be wanting to be on that card. So I think it's a great move on his part. On the UFC's part. And we will see if it's a great move on his part.
Now, Ken, I'm just going to play devil's advocate here and sort of ask you the question that a lot of people are wondering. The thing with you and Brock Lesnar was that you guys were so accomplished in grappling. You were accomplished in a whole range of skills, and you were developed, in MMA. Then you went back to wrestling, and then you went back to MMA. I'm just wondering, CM Punk, he doesn't have any skills that we really know of. He's got some grappling ability that he started developing recently. In your opinion, as a professional fighter, can he pick up the skills needed to be a successful fighter in the UFC at the age of 36 without a background in MMA in such a short period of time? Can he do it?
If I was training him, I would put my reputation on it, and especially if he's getting the right fighter, somebody of his caliber that doesn't have five fights or 10 fights as a pro. If they're going to give him somebody that's around his caliber, 1-0, 2-1, something where it's reasonable. And especially with what I know about his background and what he's done before he became a pro wrestler with his collegiate career and stuff like that, I would put my reputation on it that I could get this guy to win his first fight. Just because I've done it through my whole career. I know how to take guys, I know how to mold them, and I know how to beat the specific guy, especially when they don't have that much experience.
Interesting. I mean, I'm not sure what your schedule is like. I understand, obviously, you're doing security. Are you still training people, and would you possibly train CM Punk if the opportunity presented itself?
I do train, but I get very, very selective on who I train. Right now, I just work with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
But I would take that in a heartbeat because I just know what I could do with him. I know exactly what it would take for him to get a win.
And, obviously you won the most successful crossovers ever when it comes to going from MMA to pro wrestling. I guess for a lot of MMA fans listening at home, can you just explain to us how difficult is it making the transition from MMA and pro wrestling? And what do you think are the hardest things about making that transition back and forth?
Well, I think the hardest thing is basically one, with pro wrestling, there's so much freedom. Even though you're traveling all the time, your time is used up all the time. But I think it's the amount of time that you got to put in to prepare for a fight. It's that 3 months or 2 months that you've got to lock yourself in and you can't have any distractions. To me, that would be the hardest thing for him to come from wrestling into fighting, is to be able to stay focused on one individual for a 2 to 3 month period and not have any distractions, because in pro wrestling you got all kinds of distractions and things going on and moving from place to place, and it's exciting. When you prepare for a fight, it's absolutely, completely quiet. I mean, you have to focus on training, eating, sleeping, preparing for one guy for 2 to 3 months, and everything else stops.
And, just lastly on CM Punk, you're a guy that's worked with both companies, UFC and WWE, and have a great mind for pro wrestling and MMA. In your professional opinion, do you see CM Punk returning to the WWE eventually after his MMA run? Or do you see this as CM Punk's new career path, and we're probably not likely to see him in the WWE again?
This is what I think. I think if he brings the right people in, and I wouldn't suggest him trying to make a long career of the UFC, At least not right now, not until, you know, you get a couple of fights under your belt and see where you're at, especially at his age. But what I can see is for him to get a couple fights under his belt, get those wins, and then his career in pro wrestling would skyrocket. But his thing is he's got a lot of people around him right now that think they know what they're doing with him, and they may. But from what I'm hearing, they're trying to teach him a lot of stuff. And, you know, I'm not going to give away my secrets, but if he brings in the right people, this guy could really skyrocket his career in pro wrestling. And if he chooses to move on, then he can go for one big payday and take a shot, and then he could step away. But you're not going to have a long drive at this because, one, you're starting out at such an older age, but you can make an impact in a short amount of time. But like I said, right now in his career, where he's at right now, his biggest decision right now is making the right decision on who to bring in. That's the biggest decision right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Ken, just going back to you, you know, a quick look through your Twitter feed, which obviously is at Shamrock Ken, you know, it shows a staggering amount of tweets from your wrestling fan base. You know, it seems as though a lot of people still very much remember the things you did during the Attitude Era. And I mean, you're a guy, you weren't even in the WWF for that long, but you did make an impact. You know, are we any closer to seeing Ken Shamrock inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, or at least making an appearance on Monday Night Raw?
I'm not sure. You know, I would hope so. Like I said, I think that, you know, I did enough. I thought I made, I think the proof's in the pudding. The wrestling's definitely not the same that it was before I was there. It's definitely changed since after I was there.
Yeah.
So I think that's a statement for himself. But, and I also believe that, you know, even though there's a lot of talk back and forth, I think that the people at WWE are professional, you know, and that there's a lot of stuff going on with them right now that they need to maybe step away, take a look about what it is that they're looking at, what it is that's going on, look at the landscape, and try to make the right decision on what's best for the company. And you know what? After everything is said and done, all the stuff that we say to, you know, to try and hype people up, the bottom line is this. I still believe that there's people there that can make the right decision for WWE. I believe that wholeheartedly, and I believe that they will.
You know, last time you were on the show, you mentioned that that you don't really speak to the WWE very often. There's not much communication going on between you two. But, you know, since you've spoken to us, you were a part of the WWE 2K14 video game, which we were all very excited about. Just wondering, has there been any more headway made, you know, in your communication with the WWE? And have you been speaking to them a little bit more in the last 6 months?
I haven't spoke to them directly, but I've definitely gotten some you know, some locker room talk. But again, that doesn't mean anything. But, you know, they have never said anything negative about me. I just haven't heard anything.
Now, Ken, just going back to UFC, you know, something good and obviously a good sign that things are great between you and the UFC. Your photography is currently featured on the UFC Fight Pass, meaning, you know, obviously people can watch all your fights. You know, just for all the fans listening out there, what's a good fight that stands out to you that you can recommend for the fans to check out, and why is that?
Well, I would have to say there's a couple of them. One of them was the second fight with Royce Gracie. And the first one to me, if you watch that first fight, you'll see they took my shoes away. And my feet, when I go to try and push off the mat when I'm on the bottom, when he rolls me and I try to get my knee up inside, I go to try and push off the mat and my feet are slipping. And you'll watch that fight. And that's what got me in trouble there. And I hadn't fought without shoes ever. And they took them away the night before the fight, saying that we couldn't use them because they're a weapon. Well, he got to use his gi, and that was a weapon. Okay, so forget about that. But then watch the second fight with me and him. And then you'll see that the difference between being able to at least have a heads up about how the fight is going to be run with or without shoes, being able to train with it, being able to prepare for that. And then you see a whole different outcome of that fight. And keep in mind, when you watch the two fights, keep in mind that I had 2.5 years of experience in grappling. Royce had 25 years with 50 years of experience behind him. If you look at the odds tables on that, it would have been 100-1 that I could even win the fight. And that's how much experience that there was above me. And there was no coaching for this. I had to do all of it on my own. I had to do the research. I had to do the training. I had to adopt the ground and pound. That was the first time you ever saw a guy sit in the pocket, stuff the hips, and pound a guy. And then people developed it, became a little bit more better at it. But, I had to develop that in order to fight a guy that had that much more experience than me in the grappling arts. And then I'd say probably, there was so many of them. I would have to say just the difference between those two fights, not being prepared for the fight and then being prepared for the fight.
Absolutely, and all the fans need to make sure they check those fights out, because there's a lot of classics there. I think a lot of the modern fans still haven't gotten a chance to watch. Ken, we've got a few fan questions for you, but before we jump to them, just speaking of the future, we just wanted to get your opinion. Just going back to the WWE for a second, the company, has taken a big step forward. They're focusing on PG. Just wondering, in your professional opinion, when Vince McMahon retires, or let's say he retires tomorrow, and Triple H takes over the company, do you think it thrives like it did in the 2000s, or in the 90s when you were a part of it? Or do you think that it declines at an even higher rate than it has already?
Boy, that's speculation. I really don't know. It's hard to tell. There's just, I couldn't even comment on that because I just don't know.
That's entirely fair enough. Well, we've got one more question in regards to wrestling, and obviously it involves TNA. While you were in pro wrestling, you were a part of TNA, and TNA took a major blow when they lost their TV deal with Spike. What, in your opinion, have you heard anything, and what do you think went wrong for the company?
Well, I think they're in a tough spot. I think it wasn't just TNA that was hurting. You look at it was all the way up to the WWF. Or E. You look at all the way across the board, pro wrestling was really going down. You've got to look at the landscape from 30,000 feet up. It just wasn't TNA. It just happened to have a bigger impact on TNA because they don't have that big cushion and didn't have the space to lose any money and continue to keep working as they were, whereas WWF does have that capability. So they took, obviously, the fans could see a bigger hit on them, but WWF took just as much a hard hit as everybody else in the wrestling world.
Absolutely. Now, Ken, jumping to these fan questions, we got our first question from a username by the name of Giza. He'd like to say that you're one of his favorites and also ask you a question. He'd like you to tell us about Steve Blackman. Was he as legitimate as people said he was? And do you have any stories and experiences with him?
Well, I know Steve was a legitimate striker. Guy had great karate experience, was a good wrestler, and me and him rolled around in the ring for a little while just to go do some experience and see what he had. And he's a legitimate tough guy, and it's not the kind of guy you want to meet in a dark alley.
Okay, fair enough. Now, we've got another question. This is from one of the Sherdog users. His name is Bisexual MMA, believe it or not. And his question is, have you been approached for a paid ambassadorial, a Bellator role like Royce Gracie?
Wow. What my goal is to be able to have the opportunity to be able to work with the young kids and young athletes and be able to answer any questions for them as they move forward in their careers, to really try and help them get through obstacles that they may face along the way, which I've already faced, and be able to help them get through those times. But as far as having a role or a job or anything like that, I've never really thought about it. I'm just doing it just because I just want to do it. So, if somebody came up and said, "Hey, we'd love you to be a part of this, and can you jump in and be a part of what we have going here?" As long as it has something to do with to improve the company and be able to help young athletes and young kids to move forward in their careers, I'm always going to be about that.
And a great answer there, Ken. Now, we're going to finish up the interview with something that we call the Submission Radio Tap-Out Round. It's where we throw a whole bunch of fun questions at you, and you answer with the first thing in mind. Are you ready, Ken?
Yes.
Okay. Now, how has the world of personal security been for you in 2014?
Well, I say there's a future.
Okay. Ken, what are your New Year's Eve resolutions?
That it will be better than the last.
Do you think that Frank Shamrock belongs in the UFC Hall of Fame?
Yes.
Do you think Brock Lesnar returns to MMA?
No.
This one is actually from a fan. His name is Khabib Fan from the Shamrock Forums. He wants to know, what was your funnest fight?
My funnest fight would have to be Masakatsu Funaki in Japan. We went 46 minutes.
Wow. Now, Ken, how often do you still train?
Every day.
WWE champion or UFC champion? Which one would you choose and why?
Both. And the reason why is because I do both. And they're both, to me, I get to entertain the fans, and I get to be able to mingle and enjoy that. There's been nothing better than to get in front of 120,000 people and hear them chant your name. To me, that's just, there's nothing else, no feeling like it. So I would not give one for the other.
We hope that one day we'll experience like 100 people chanting our name. Now, Ken, thoughts on Sting's WWE debut?
Awesome.
And finally, Ken, if you could have...
Electrifying and awesome.
Wonderful. And finally, Ken, if you could have one dream match with any opponent, past or present, in the MMA world, who would you choose and why? And this is anybody from past to present, one person who you haven't fought. Who's one name that would be a dream match for you?
Whether I fought him or I didn't fight him?
Oh, it'd be someone that you never fought.
Oh, that I've never fought. Brock Lesnar.
Wow, that would definitely be selling out a pay-per-view right there. Ken, we really want to thank you for your time. Guys, don't forget to follow Ken Shamrock on Twitter at ShamrockKen. And don't forget to check out his website, kenshamrock.com. It's always a pleasure having you on the show, Ken. We could probably chat to you for days because you're a fascinating guy. Hopefully we'll chat to you soon, and thanks so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you guys for having me. And again, like I said, it's always a pleasure to be able to talk to my fans out there. God bless you guys, and thank you for all the support over the years. Love you.
All right, guys, what a legend in Ken Shamrock. Now, we've got a lot to talk about. Big weekend of fights. We had the UFC Ultimate 20 fighter finale. We had UFC on Fox 13. But the first thing me and Cass want to quickly break down was World Series of Fighting 16. In particular, the fight we want to talk about is John Fitch's fight with Rousimar Palhares. Casper, the conclusion of the fight. Were you surprised the way this thing ended?
To be honest, not really, given how dominant Rousimar Palhares has looked recently. And obviously, John Fitch has shown that he's not exactly impervious to submissions, as Josh Berkman proved. Another first-round leg lock finish by Rousimar Palhares. You know, no real surprises there. He went in, he jumped in for a single, and basically turned that single leg into a... I mean, he went for an inverted heel hook, I believe, and then turned it into a knee bar with John Fitch tapping furiously. I wouldn't say I'm surprised, but I will say the one thing that I'm taking away from this... Actually, I'm taking away two things. One is that Rousimar Palhares is fantastic at welterweight. He probably should have been there for much, much longer. And I wish he'd gone there a lot earlier in his career. Number two is the UFC will probably never, ever, ever, ever have him back in the octagon. And I say that, I know that Dana White said that he wouldn't be welcome, but, you know, a lot of guys have, you know, he said that a lot of guys won't be welcome, like Paul Daly and Josh Barnett. I don't think Rousimar Palhares would ever be let back into the octagon, purely because if he did, most of the top 10 welterweights, I mean, not that he's invincible, but a lot of them will probably walk around with bum legs, and given the amount of injuries in 2014, I don't think the UFC would ever want to have that again. So I don't think they'd have a liability like Rousimar Palhares back in the octagon.
Yeah, absolutely. Some great points made there, Casper, and a big congratulations to Rousimar for doing this thing. Exciting to see who they match him up with next. Now, going to the first fight card we're going to talk about from the UFC, the Ultimate Fighter 20 finale, and jumping right into it, you know, Aisling Daly versus our own Alex Chambers. You and me got a chance to hang around Alex in Sydney, have a sort of a closer look at her, you know, as a person, talking to all the kids, running some camps with the kids. She's a great human being, but she had a bit of a tough night out at UFC tough 20 finale, didn't she, Cass?
Unfortunately, well, the bad thing started with Aisling Daly coming in overweight. She was 118 pounds instead of obviously the agreed 115. And then she lost in the first round by armbar. So it's not exactly looking that great for Alex Chambers. As an Aussie, I hope that the UFC decides to keep her in there. I know at the start of The Ultimate Fighter, Dana White said, you guys are all in, you're all in the UFC. So I don't think it's a case where, you know, people are getting cut because the division's already developed. I think it's a case where the strawweight division, all the girls who were in the show, they are officially in the division. And unless they lose, you know, 2-3 in a row, they won't get cut. So I hope that it all turns around for Alex and she can definitely score a win in her next fight.
Absolutely. You know, it was a big loss, but hopefully, like you said, the UFC keep her around because they build a lot of PR around her here in Australia. So I think they'll keep her around for at least another fight. Now, Daly, she, I believe, was very underrated in The Ultimate Fighter. She was picked last. I don't think the coaches really connected or understood her. She came in with a bit of a complicated story about, you know, having issues with depression and stuff like that. And she had a very different style. She wasn't like the other girls. She wasn't as girly. She had her own kind of tomboy thing going. I don't know if that many people understood her as a fighter. I really thought she was a hidden jewel in The Ultimate Fighter, and I wasn't very surprised when I saw the results of the fight. I actually think that she's got a big future in the UFC, and coming from that tough camp, you know, with Conor McGregor and all those other killers, I think, you know, she's really going to be someone to watch in the division. I think she's a true fighter, and I'm really sort of excited to see what happens with her next. Did you think she was a bit underrated, Cass?
I agree. I definitely did think that she was underrated in the house, and I'm not surprised to see her doing well in the UFC. She's actually a fighter that's definitely on my list. She's of my top list of people to look out for. I actually can't wait to see her fight in the future.
Yeah, that's right. I don't actually understand why she was picked last. She's had a lot of experience. So I think there were a few girls. I don't know if they really picked the order for the teams very accurately. But anyway, great to see her go on and get a win. Now, the next big fight you and me are going to talk about, Cass, and just quickly touch on this. You know, Joanne Calderwood versus Si Ohi Hum. And by the way, I know I'd probably destroyed that name. Joanne obviously put on a very dominant performance. She had a huge size advantage. It was a pretty exciting fight. But the thing I took away from that fight is the fact that everybody loves Joanne. I really think she could be a big star in the future. I really think the fan base is behind her.
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not really surprised because with Joanne, I mean, she's the type of fighter that brings it. She gives the fans what she want or what they want. She's not in there to, you know, hold guys or hold girls down, get on top, lay in top control in the guard and be, you know, timid with her fighting style. She likes to get in there, she likes to strike, she likes to brawl. So it doesn't really surprise me that she's a fan favorite. And I agree, she's probably one of the most marketable women in the strawweight division, other than, say, Jessica Penne, Felice Herrig, and Carla Esparza and Rose Namajunas, but we'll talk about them later.
Great analysis there. Now, our very own Beck Rawlings, you know, I think she really built up a fan base here in Australia. People really got behind the girl, you know, and she's only 25 years old. She's got an interesting story behind her, a very interesting look. What did you think about her chances against Heather Jo Clark going into that fight?
I honestly thought she was going to beat her, and it's not because she's an Aussie. I just thought she was the better fighter. With Heather, you know, she's a girl that you can't really underestimate her. She's obviously a wily veteran. Obviously a former professional hockey player. I just think with Beck, it was more of a case where she needs to tighten up a few things. Early in that fight, there was that accidental headbutt. She had that big ass hematoma on her head. And there was a few times where she took Heather Jo down, and then Heather Jo Clark ended up in top control anyway. I think she needs to just maybe slow down a little bit when she takes someone down, be a little bit more careful, and make sure she's, you know, I guess adapts that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu philosophy of position first. She needs to get her position first before she works on other things. What do you think, Dennis?
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there was too much emotion going into this fight, Cass, but to be honest with you, and I think Beck used those emotions in the wrong way in the ring. She just overcommitted too much. And, you know, you really saw when they were standing on the feet how much, you know, how dominant she was in her striking, in the striking department. But Heather Jo Clark, she's a wily veteran, man. I think people underestimate her, and she's actually, you know, a pretty smart fighter. She won that with a very good strategy, and And I think, like you mentioned, Beck made a few mistakes and Heather really capitalized on it. Overall, a fun fight to watch. I really enjoyed this fight. I thought it was a great fight. And, welcome to the UFC for both of those girls. I'm excited to see what happens with them both in the future, and I'm interested to see what happens to them.
Yeah, absolutely. We mentioned Felice Herrig prior. She's another girl that was successful on this card. She defeated Lisa Ellis in the second round via submission armbar. No surprise there. I picked Felice to win, and I think they've sort of given her a matchup that she could win. Felice is probably one of, if not the most marketable women in the division. She's obviously very active on social media. Doesn't hurt that she's not bad looking either. And I think they're definitely going to try to push her towards a title shot very, very soon.
Yeah, that's right. Very interesting as well because she's such good friends with Carla Esparza, who we'll talk about later. So interesting to see if they'd fight each other. Also, Lisa Ellis, in her heyday, I think she was a very good fighter. Unfortunately, she spent time off. She had kids. I just don't know if she's the same fighter she once was. I know that she was a bit fired up against Felice because, Felice felt like she was a much better fighter than her. And she really tried to put up a fight at the very start of that bout. But to me, she doesn't really look like a fighter, an elite fighter that belongs in the UFC at the moment. I think a lot of that fire is gone. Interested to see what she does next and if she gets another fight in the UFC. But I'd say she's not as good as she was, a long time ago, sort of in the heyday.
Yeah, and she sort of mentioned that problem in the house as well when she was on The Ultimate Fighter of finding that fire and getting fired up, when she faced Jessica Penne. And I don't have kids, Dennis, you don't have kids. So this is purely speculation here. But I think sometimes, I think the older you get in life, the more things you start to worry about. Because when you're a kid, you feel like you're invincible. The older you get, you start finding out all these things that can kill you and diseases and, all the things in life. And I think when you have kids, you sort of get to that point where you're not just living your life for yourself. You obviously have to take care of your kids. So I'm just sort of putting out a theory. I don't know Lisa personally, but, it could be a factor that now that she's got a family, she's got other things on her mind. Having said that, a lot of the fighters in the UFC do have families and do have kids, and it can motivate them. I'm not sure what it is with Lisa. I'm still definitely interested in seeing her fight in the UFC. I just don't necessarily expect her to get that title shot anytime soon.
Yeah, that's right. And it really looks like she's lost her edge. And, a fighter like Beck Rawlings, she's got a kid as well. So it's like you said, it's not necessarily because they have kids, but I think with Lisa, and like you mentioned, we don't know what's going on in her life, but when you go from the role of being a mother and then you go into the gym to be a fighter, not everybody can go from one to the other and maintain that intensity. And what I feel when I see Lisa is there's just not enough of an edge, there's not enough of a hunger, and there's not enough of an intensity. And sometimes fighters can get hurt when that happens. So I'll be interested to see what Lisa does next. She definitely tried to put her best foot forward against Felice, and Felice is, I reckon, one of the best girls in the division. If she gets another fight, I'll be interested to see what happens, or if she chooses not to fight again. She's had a good career thus far anyway. Yeah,
let's talk about the main card. There's pretty much not a single fight here that isn't worth talking about. I want to kick off the Jessica Penne-Randa Marcos fight. That was a really, really, really good fight. I will tell you this now, Jessica Penne is one of my favorite women to watch. I find her really exciting. I like the way she fights. I like the way she just goes in there, looks to dominate. She's got those really long legs. She really uses them. I will say, though, in the first round, I didn't see the Jessica that, we're used to seeing. I think Randa evolved a lot since the show. We saw her striking improve. And Randa Marcos, she went from being the dark horse on the show and surprising people to, in this fight, even though she lost, I think she gained a lot of people's respect. It was a split decision. It was really close. I think Randa was a little bit surprised. I think Jessica Penne did, enough in the last round to get it done. But this is an awesome, awesome fight. Very back and forth. A lot of sweeps. Jessica Penne, you saw that one point where she was on the bottom and she used those, really long legs to sweep Randa. I'm excited to see both these girls. I think having both these girls so close to each other. I think Jessica Penne, she's probably, again, a lot of these girls are close to a title shot. I think Jessica Penne definitely is. And having Randa so close behind her, it wouldn't surprise me if both these girls would be fighting for the title soon.
Yeah, I think the UFC did a really good thing launching this division because putting all these girls on the card at the same time, I think there's a lot to be excited about for future contestants, contenders, and future fights to be made. And I think, with some divisions, you can't picture who's going to be next, how many people there are in the division. But just watching this one card, you get excited about the women's strawweight division because there is some depth there at this early stage in the division. So I think the UFC did the right thing there. And yeah, I agree with you, Casper. Jessica's, very exciting to watch indeed. Now, speaking of the next fight, Casper, you've got a dog named Yancy, don't you?
I do, which is why I'm happy the Yancy Medeiros won. In all honesty, I was just excited to see an exciting fight, and I know Yancy brings it. It's no secret that Yancy used to be a middleweight. He blew up a long, long time ago, trained with the Diaz bros, came down to lightweight, and he fought Joe Proctor, who, by the way, we've had Ricardo Lamas on the show twice not too long ago, and I think that guy looks like the white version of Ricardo Lamas, in my opinion. He's like the perfect mix of Ricardo Lamas and Robert De Niro from Taxi Driver.
Yeah, that's a good assessment. What did you think of the fight?
Oh, we're talking about the fight now. Look, Yancy Medeiros, man, the reason why I like him, he's a really, really exciting fighter. Those two guys went back and forth. I really like the way Yancy uses his reach. As you saw, that spinning back heel kick to the liver, he got Joe Proctor. It was a delayed reaction. He went down and then he pounced for that submission, the guillotine choke. I thought it was an awesome fight. What did you think, Dennis?
Yeah, and Joe Proctor, he's a tough guy. So definitely a very good win for Yancy. I think he's really building up his fan base right now, and I think he's in the right frame of mind. I was listening to an old interview with him where he was talking about how bad his nutrition was, how he wasn't focused. I think he is very focused, and he can be a lot of trouble for a lot of people. When he throws the strikes, he really does look like he comes from the DS camp, really puts together really good combinations. Yeah, I'm excited to see what he has in the future. Now, going into the next fight, Cass, KJ Noons and Darren Cruikshank. Now, what did you think when you heard these two guys are going to fight each other? Because, to me, fight of the night popped into my head straight away. I
wasn't any different. I think most people thought this is going to be a fight of the night. And in this case, unfortunately, no contest, second round. We saw KJ Noons. He had his hands out. And just quickly, another reason why it was going to be fight of the night, KJ Noons, obviously fantastic boxing. And Darren Cruikshank is a madman. He's got a lot of crazy kicks. It's like a boxer versus, taekwondo kicking machine. And unfortunately, after the second round, it was all over. KJ Noons, he basically did the old John Jones, hands in front of the face. And it's not fair of me to say John Jones because a lot of fighters do, obviously, to frame and keep distance. He kept doing it, and he cracked Darren really, really badly with that accidental eye poke.
Yeah, that's right. I think people had a mixed reaction to it because obviously, Uriah Faber accidental eye poke and won the fight, very recently. I believe it was last week, was it, Casper? Because so many fights that get lost. Yeah, and that was a great fight that was ruined by eye pokes. With this one, and by the way, Darren is one of my favorite guys to watch, and I think he was winning the fight. I really think he was just doing an amazing job. But with this one, KJ really kept his fingers out there. And people go, well, what can you do? It's a part of the sport. The gloves can't really be modified that well at the moment to stop it. Okay, that's true. So what are we going to do to penalize these people that keep their fingers out? Because I'm not blaming KJ for this. I know he wanted the fight to go on, but John McCarthy said, look, keep your fingers in when you strike. And I mean, it's just a habit thing, and it's a freak thing that happens. But that second time he got Darren, man, it was brutal. I mean, he could have really damaged Darren's eye. And I just think, I'm not blaming KJ for this, but you got to keep your fingers in, especially after such a significant thing happens at the start of the fight. So I just think, it's a part of the sport, but I think it's out of control, and more rules need to be brought in. So, for example, in my opinion, if you have those fingers out and it happens again, something significant needs to happen. Something that makes somebody so scared to keep those fingers out, they're not gonna do it. They have to really beat it into these fighters' heads, because those eye pokes, man, they're gonna cut people's career shorter than any other injury in the ring. And we've seen it with Michael Bisping and a lot of other fighters. Even Tito Ortiz was talking about his detached retina to us in his last interview. It's a really serious problem in MMA. And yeah, something needs to be done to scare people into working into their training the fact that they cannot keep their fingers out when they strike, and to modify their training not to keep those fingers out when they strike, because it really needs to be modified when they train. If you just tell them in the fight not to do it, some people just can't because they just don't train that way. That's not how they strike. So everybody needs to be, have the fear of God scared into them, keep those fingers in. Otherwise, the more it happens, the more things like this will happen. And I just don't want to see fighters get injured. That's my main thing. I just don't want people to detach retinas and their careers cut short because their eyes get poked. The fact that the fights get ended early and a lot of people get disappointed, all right, that's really sad as well, and people want to see the fight happen. But primarily, I just think these eye pokes could be one of the biggest risks in the ring, over concussions, over everything else, because these detached retinas, man, a lot of the time people can't come back from that. And, I'm hoping Darren's fine, but yeah, his eye looked absolutely brutal, very, very brutal. And I believe Uriah Faber, he did it absolutely accidentally. It looked like a huge accident, but I believe Rivera was talking about needing surgery after that as well.
Wow.
So it's just killing fighters, man, and it's shortening careers. And yeah, I just hate seeing a guy like Darren, who's got so much potential, not being able to fight in the future because his eye just doesn't hold up and he might go blind. But anyway, that's just my thought. That's my critique. What do you think about this whole crazy eye poke thing, Cass?
Yeah, look, I didn't know that he needed surgery, Francisco Rivera. I didn't realize that he needed surgery and that the eye poke was that serious. And I'm definitely with you on that one. I think Uriah's was unintentional. I think with KJ Noons, absolutely, it was unintentional as well. It was bizarre because Darren Cruikshank, he sort of cried out in pain straight away. And Big John McCarthy was like, no. He didn't want to stop it. And then KJ acknowledged it, which is the only reason why Big John stopped it. And then obviously you saw on the replay, it was brutal. His eye was bleeding. And, you covered a lot of points there, Dennis. It reminded me, obviously, of Alan Belcher. He's had probably one of the worst ones in UFC history. I mean, that was disgusting to look at. When he opened his eye, it was just full of blood. Blood was overflowing out of his eye. And obviously, Michael Bisping had another bad one, but I'm pretty sure that was in training. Look, they need to do something. I'm not a scientist. I don't know how the gloves work. I think Bellator had those fancy Everlast gloves, and a lot of it was more, to combat fighters breaking their hands. But I think eye pokes were also reduced. I don't know what to do, but you're right. I think the fighters need to be scared to have their fingers out. And obviously we've got John Jones versus Daniel Cormier coming up really soon at UFC 182. And the reason why I bring up John Jones is obviously because I'm not trying to point a finger at him and say he's guilty, but he's one of the guys that cops the most flack for it. And with his style, with that, handout, old school Muay Thai technique, a lot of guys do get the fingers in the face. We saw it with Glover Teixeira. We saw it this past weekend with KJ Noons. And this is, it's one thing for KJ Noons and Darren Cruikshank. I mean, this is going to be fight of the night. A lot of people are disappointed. But imagine if one of the most hyped up main events, title fights in UFC history between Daniel Cormier and John Jones, imagine if that ended in the same way. Imagine if that ended due to some kind of eye poke. I mean, A, it'd be terrible for John Jones's, already shaky PR. And B, I mean, maybe that's what needs to happen for I don't know, the UFC or the Athletic Commission, or for someone to do something and maybe redesign the gloves. I don't know what needs to happen. I mean, Dana White said that they have tested things and done things, but I think this might need to be bumped up on the priority list to stop these fights, these great fights, from ending, and obviously from fighters being injured.
Yeah, that's right. And, for example, you can't, kick someone in the groin. So when the fighters train, they train not to kick someone in the groin or knee someone when they have their hand down, because they know it's going to be a significant thing for them. So I think if the UFC really introduced some kind of punishment, or the commission, even a fine or something significant that really affects them with those fingers out, in training, when they practice, they're going to make sure they keep those fingers in. So I agree with you, Casper. If John Jones versus Daniel Cormier gets waved off in the first round because Cormier can't see out of his eye, then that would be an absolute tragedy. And by the way, I love the way Big John refs, but Darren said that he couldn't see, and he was like, "Are you sure? Are you sure? I can continue. I can continue." Big ups to Darren for being honest about not being able to see and not fighting on with one eye, which is something that a lot of fighters do. I mean, people can't look down on him for doing that. It's just, you got to be honest with those situations, and you got to pull the plug. Otherwise, fighting with one eye, it's just, that's just not on. So good on Darren, and good on the doctor recognizing that he can't go on, and Darren admitting it as well, because I would have hated for that fight to go on and Darren have one eye throughout that fight.
I think, and the other thing with Big John, I think he's so used to guys and fighters wanting to continue, that it's his natural reaction to say, get the doctor to go away and say he's fine, he's fine. I don't think he realized that Darren was the one saying that he couldn't see. So it's one of those cases. Let's talk about the next fight. We had Charles Oliveira versus Jeremy Stephens. Charles Oliveira, I mean, he looked absolutely fantastic in that fight. A very improved Charles Oliveira. But what about Jeremy Stephens getting out of all those armbars and all those submissions? What did you think of the fight, Dennis?
Jeez, it reminded me when GSP versus Dan Hardy and had him in all those arm bars as well. And you just wonder, like, what is it that didn't finish him? And I think Oliveira will go back with his coaches and watch the tape just to see that one tiny little move that could have really finished it. But there's no doubt about it. Jeremy's one tough SOB. What I was impressed with in that fight the most is the fact that Oliveira has such an amazing grappling game. I mean, Jeremy, he's one intense individual. He's very intimidating. He's a wild man. And yeah, Oliveira just dominated him grappling wise. Big ups to Jeremy for avoiding those submissions being finished. But yeah, I'm very impressed with Charles. Interested to see what happens. And I know he's had some fights where he's looked a bit crap and, he didn't look up to his potential. I think this is one of those fights where he absolutely did look very, very good. So that was my thought on the fight. What did you think, Cass? What happens to Oliveira next?
Well, I don't know too many fights where he's looked crap. I mean, obviously he used to be in the lightweight division. Against Cub Swanson, he got knocked out pretty quickly. And then against Frankie Edgar, I mean, that's Frankie Edgar. That's potentially the next, featherweight title contender. Since then, he's looked really good. He's really coming to his own. One thing, though, after the fight, they were talking about that man being possibly the next title contender and things like that. I gotta say, I disagree, because even though he's improved his wrestling, there were times in that fight where he did look slightly... In the end, I think he needs to work on his cardio, because he looked a bit flat. He was, trying to bait Jeremy Stephens to go for... to come down to the ground, and, he was basically impersonating Damian Maia, UFC 112. And that's not the kind of style that's going to get you a fight against Jose Aldo. And let's be honest, Jose Aldo has some of the best wrestling defense in MMA, and I don't see Charles Oliveira taking him down. And if he did verse Jose Aldo, I think it'd be pretty lopsided, and I think Jose Aldo would basically use him as a punching bag. There's no disrespect to Charles Oliveira. I just think that some of the title talk is a little bit premature. Now, just before we talk about the main event, Carla Esparza, Rose Namajunas, I just want to point out that obviously this event took place in the Pearl of the Palms, and this is kind of a big deal because the Pearl of the Palms hasn't had a UFC event in, I don't know exactly how long, but quite a while. The story there is Dana White used to gamble so much and win so much money, his credit limit got cut off from the casino. And since then, Dana White's like, well, I'm not doing another event here. And of course, the Ultimate Fighter finales always used to take place in the Pearl at the Palms. Now, since the ownership changed, I don't know if anyone is following Dana White's Instagram or our Twitter, which is obviously Submission AUS, cheap plug. The new owner of the Pearl of the Palms sent Dana White a bottle of his favorite wine and then sent him a title belt. You can Google it, or you can check out our Twitter. There's actually a blackjack title belt, custom made, Dana White's face on it. I think it says 25-0, which is Dana White's victories, and he sent him that belt. So I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that this event was at the Pearl of the Palms.
Yeah, so it looks like everything got smoothed over, and good to see that. Dana White can be in one of those movies where they go into casinos and make a lot of money. He could be like a part of a heist movie or something one day. But the guy is amazing. He doesn't lose. He's going to have to teach us how the tricks of the trade, because I'm horrible at cards. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, I want Dana White to teach me card counting. I'm sure he knows, and I got bills to pay, so I'd really appreciate it. Let's talk about this main event, Carla Esparza versus Rose Namajunas. Dennis, how did you think this fight was going to go before it actually happened?
I thought Rose had a look in her eye. She was very determined and had a lot of confidence in her. And that look in her eye, Casper, that drove me across the... You see that look in people's eyes. Sometimes I see it when my girlfriend's pissed off at me, and you sort of get out of the way and you pick your battles. Rose looked like she was in the zone. I thought Carla was going to win it because she's a wily veteran, and I think she's got a very well-rounded game. I think Rose is very good. I think there's a little bit of room for improvement. She can have a bit more experience. I thought Carla was going to win it, but still very impressed with Rose. And, as I watched The Ultimate Fighter, I was impressed with her as a human being and impressed with the fights in the house. So, yeah, she really grew on me as a person. I think a lot of people liked her, but, yeah, my choice was Carla. What did you think, Cass? Who did you think was going to win?
Yeah, I think being the veteran doesn't always win you the fight, as we've seen many times in the UFC. But I think in this case, I was surprised that Carla was the underdog, and I was picking her to win as well. As a lot of people say, and obviously when she won, the wrestler will win. I was really surprised that she was the underdog. And in terms of Rose, I think she's going to improve a lot from this fight. She's a young girl, young fighter. You mentioned that look in your eye, and I couldn't help thinking of, Chuck Liddell with that look in his eye, motivated BJ Penn, and all those pseudo-personalities. I think with Rose, you're right, though. She came in, she looked really fired up, and she really believed, 100% believed with no equivocations that she was going to win the fight. And, sometimes you see those fights and you see those fighters when they come in and they talk about the fight before and they say, look, this is going to be a big challenge and it's going to be my toughest test and things like that. I don't think Rose was looking at it like that. I think she really, truly believed that she was going to go out there and be, the Ultimate Fighter winner. And I wasn't necessarily rooting for her, but I was very excited to see that if she won, she would be the youngest UFC champion ever and obviously usurp John Jones for that title. So I was really excited to see that. Of course, Carla beat her, did it in really impressive fashion. I mean, submitting her, Rose has been an absolute beast on the show. So to see her get that finish, not just a decision, really, really impressive. And I think, obviously, Rose, she's going to go away. She's going to learn a lot from this. She's, as they said before the fight, she's crazy. She's fearless. She likes the fight to get, messy, and she looks for openings there. I think we're going to see Rose Namajunas over the next few years really refine her style, maybe take away some of those crazy things and just add in just what works and really simplify her style. So at 22 years of age, she definitely hasn't hit her ceiling yet.
Yeah, that's right. 22 years, man. I mean, what were the listeners doing when they were 22? I know me and Casper were making some homemade ice cream, singing Ukrainian and Polish songs.
You're thinking of Pete Holmes when he interviewed Ronda Rousey.
Right.
Yeah,
I was watching that. Just FYI, I was watching that clip the other day, and man, he does such a good. If you guys haven't seen, what's his name, Pete Holmes, I saw him do some stand up here live in Melbourne. If you guys haven't seen him interview Ronda Rousey, that is one of my favorite Ronda Rousey interviews that anyone's ever done ever, and it shows a completely different side of Ronda that you guys want to see. So make sure you check it out because it is a hoot and a half. I love that video. I can watch. It's one of those videos you have a nice night out or you want to be entertained. You put that video on and have a bit of a laugh.
It's hilarious. It's one of those YouTube videos that you can always go back to and it never really gets old. It's in there in the favorites. Yeah, if you haven't checked it out, Pete Holmes and Ronda Rousey, definitely check that out. Next up, let's talk about UFC on Fox. Dos Santos versus Miocic. Where do you want to start for this card, Dennis? What's the first fight that jumps out for you in this one?
Well, look, let's just quickly give Ian and Casper, you're going to have to pronounce his surname here because I don't have my surname cap on today, so I'm not able to pronounce it. I don't want to butcher it.
Ian Entwistle versus Anthony Burchak. Is that who you're talking about?
There we go. Exactly. You can read my mind. Congratulations to Ian for an impressive heel hook. He looks like a very exciting fighter. The heel hook was something that you guys need to check out if you didn't watch the prelim card on Fight Pass, because what he basically does is he puts it on and they roll all the way through the ring until Ian has Anthony up against the fence. Anthony has nowhere to go. Ian really cranks it, and I hope Anthony didn't hurt his leg, but it looked pretty brutal. So congratulations to Ian. And Ian was one of those guys. He was really pumped to be on the show. I think he was a big fan, much like all the listeners and you and me, Cass, we're fans of the sport. And I think he was just pumped to speak to Joe Rogan. He was really excited just to be in that ring. I think he's pictured it for so long. Me in the ring after a win talking to Joe Rogan. Imagine that. And it happened. I think, he was just absolutely pumped. Very interested to see what happens with the kid. But very, very good finish. A very exciting finish indeed.
Yeah, good on Ian Entwistle. I like this guy, really exciting, and I'm always down for a sexy heel hook. It reminded me of Fedor Emelianenko versus Fabrizio Verdum, when he was trying to get out of that triangle choke, and he sort of got cornered, and the cage was there, and he couldn't move any further, and obviously he defended so many triangles, but that was in a ring in pride. Anyway, we all know the story. We all know about Fabrizio Verdum versus Fedor. Let's talk about the next fight. Let's talk about Drew Dober versus Jamie Varner. Now, this is a big deal because this was Jamie Varner's 4th loss in a row. And this is unfortunately the retirement of Jamie Varner. This is the last time we'll see him in the octagon. Dennis, what did you think?
You know, Jamie Varner, he's only 30 years, I believe, but he's been fighting for a long time. He did an interview after the fight where he talked about the fact that he's just injury prone. He feels like the kids are just getting too good and he can't keep up. And it kind of looked like he lost a little bit of the fire to fight as well. He said he planned on retiring regardless of what happens in that fight. It was, I believe, his hometown or a place near and dear to his heart. And, you know, he said that in a couple of years' time, if he gets the fire back, you know, who knows, maybe he'll return. But he's got a gym. He's happy. He's had a really good career. He's happy with everything he's done. Obviously, some amazing fights put on. And, you know, I'm happy to see a guy retire and, you know, really, you know, make the right decision for his life and not, you know, sort of keep fighting and keeps chasing something if his heart isn't really 100% into it. So congratulations to Jamie Varner on an exciting career. I'm sure we'll get him on the show at some point to discuss some of those highlights that, you know, you and me have enjoyed as fans.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a lot of respect for him because for a guy to be 30 years old and fighting in the UFC and to retire on his own will, that's a big deal because a lot of guys, and we've spoken to many, many guys in the sport. I believe Mark Hominick was talking about it last week. You know, the guys that just stick around and, you know, they get a lot of injuries and they really don't look too good. So I respect Jamie Varner for being able to walk away. And I mean, let's be honest, he hasn't won in, I think it's been about 2 years. I'm just bringing up his record now. He hasn't won since beating Melvin Gillard in a split decision, and that was December 29th, 2012 at UFC 55. Since then, he's gone on to lose to Gleison Tibau, Abel Trujillo, and James Krause. Obviously, he had that ankle injury. And I remember that fight against Edson Barboza when he won. It was a huge, huge upset. This is UFC 146 when Edson Barboza, they were talking about him possibly being the next champion, the next contender. And he went out there and he knocked him out in the first round. That was crazy. But since then, he's had a very, very clear decline. So, you know, big respect to Jamie Varner. A lot of awesome memories, obviously, in the WEC, in the UFC, XFC. He's definitely been around the block. So I wish him nothing but the best in his future.
Absolutely. Now, going on to the next fight, I quickly want to touch on Ben Saunders versus Joe Riggs-Cass. We spoke to Ben recently leading into this fight. He seemed very, very motivated. And, you know, unfortunately, the fight was stopped early because Joe went for a slam and jarred his neck, did something to his neck, a lot of whiplash, lost feeling in his arm and didn't regain it. And, you know, tapped because he was afraid he did some serious damage to that neck. What did you think when you sort of saw the result of that one?
Yeah, honestly, it didn't look that bad. It didn't look like when I saw when I saw him hurt his neck originally, I didn't think much of it. I was more surprised than anything. It's a real shame because this is meant to be an awesome fight. And Ben Saunders post fight, he did an interview. I believe it was with MMA Fighting, and he said how he was going to go for an omoplata. So imagine that. Imagine if Ben Saunders got 2 omoplatas. Not only the first guy to get an omoplata in the UFC, but to get 2 in a row would just be insane. I just think with Joe Riggs, and you spoke about this before, I mean, the guy nearly died just not too long ago. Obviously, it was a shotgun or a gun accident. And, you know, he's a guy, he's had a lot of wars, he's taken a lot of damage, and he's had a very long career. So it could be the case of his body just not necessarily holding up. What did you think, Dennis?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely right. You know, he had a handgun. He was cleaning it, and he shot a bullet through his hand. He calls his leg. Yeah, and he calls his children downstairs to say goodbye to him because he believes that he is going to die. He shoots himself, goes through his hand, hits his leg, calls his children downstairs because he's bleeding so profusely. He believes he's going to die. Says goodbye to them, wakes them up from bed, brings them down, gets his wife to bring him downstairs, says goodbye to them. And that was, when did that happen? Was that sort of earlier this year? Sorry, my timeline in my head is a bit funny. When did that happen? Do you remember? Sort of around mid to early this year, I believe it happened. We spoke to Ben about it.
It's like in the last 3-4 months, something like that.
That's right. So, all right, you go to a guy who almost died. And let's not forget, he's had so many fights. His body would be absolutely destroyed as is, just from all the training and all the past injuries that he's had. I just think going back into that ring and fighting, I don't think his body was ready for it. He might have been fully healed, but I just think going from a situation where you almost die and such a significant injury to doing one of the most difficult things that your body can do and fight in the ring, I just think it was a bit rushed. And, he went for that slam. And as everybody knows who's, fought or sort of in the personal training industry, when one area in your body isn't 100%, other areas in your body might go because they compensate, for a lot of the damage. And I think that's what happened in that slam. Maybe his leg didn't, it was 90%, but maybe wasn't 100%. And maybe, something else wasn't 100%. All it takes is the wrong landing in one of those slams and your neck is jarred. So I just think he came back a little bit too soon. I'd like to see him take a little bit of time off. I still think he has a lot to offer the fans. He was talking about post-fight how he believes he could have beaten Ben and really won that fight. I mean, he's had 40 wins, I believe. So that's just unbelievable. When he gets his next shot, hopefully he's 100%, and then we can really see what happens. I guess fans are really disappointed because he got nothing from that fight. Ben Saunders, he was really disappointed after that fight. He's not one of those guys that wants to get a victory due to the other guy getting injured. And I think, it was one of those fights that nobody really got anything from it. Obviously, Ben got Ben walked away from it. But at the end of the day, I think Ben would have preferred to have a proper fight, win or lose. So you saw the disappointment in his eye.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope Joe Riggs does get another chance in the UFC, because a lot of people were shocked when the UFC re-signed him, and a lot of people, including myself, were excited. And it just seems like nothing's really gone right. So hopefully Joe, goes away, rests, gets the body back up to 100%. And I really hope that we don't hear some kind of retirement in the next month or 2 or 3 or whatever, and we see the headlines on Bloody Elbow and it's some surprise retirement from Joe Riggs. I really hope to see him back in the cage. That's obviously if his body permits. Now, just before we talk about the main card, I want to bring up obviously the women's strawweight that was the main event on the prelim card. Fox Sports 1. It was Claudia Gadelha, which highly touted female strawweight fighter, against Joanna. And I'm going to do my best here. She's Polish, so I should nail this. Jędrzejczyk. Now she's actually the lady that's going to be fighting next for the strawweight title. In case you didn't hear, the next contender has already been named, and it's going to be her. For those who didn't see, she obviously won via split decision. There was a punch after the bell, and she sat with Dana White for the rest of the event. And we saw a lot of great takedown defense from her, and she's a fantastic striker. So this is going to be very interesting. It's going to be a good test for Carla to see if she can, in fact, use her wrestling as well as she did against Rose.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you said it very well. A big win for her. That punch afterwards, I think Claudia was a bit rocked, and then she apologized straight afterwards, saying that she didn't mean to punch her. So I don't think it was a Paul Daly type thing. And, hopefully she doesn't get a big slap on the wrist over that. It was a very good fight. And Casper, you're one of the best surname men in the business, I think. I think you did a very good job with that surname. Ooh. Pound for pound, one of the best surname men in the business. And I don't want to hear any flack from Chael Sonnen or anyone else debating that pound for pound list. You're number one for me, man. I
really appreciate that, man. I think that's why we make such a dynamic team. And I wish there was an industry where people got paid more for pronouncing surnames correctly, because if that was the case, I'd be able to pay all my bills now. Let's talk about this main card. Matt Mitrione versus Gabriel Gonzaga. First round finish. Matt Mitrione light. I want to call Matt Mitrione Twinkle Toes because he's so goddamn light on his feet. It's freaky for a guy that big to be that fast, that athletic, that spry on his feet.
You're waiting to unleash that one, weren't you? The spry.
I had a whole bunch of I had the thesaurus out. What did you think of this fight, Dennis?
Oh man, he's like a gazelle running to the watering hole. This week, well, it sort of happened last week or this week, however you want to say it. Joe Rogan was on Fighter and the Kid, and he criticized Brendan for not being an elite fighter. Brendan's got a victory over Matt Mitrione, and he did a very, very good job against him. And I don't really want to talk about Joe and what he said to Brendan, but I think that, he definitely has a spot in the division because he performed so well against guys like Matt, who are very, very good athletes. Matt Mitrione, he's a very good athlete. I think he's just one of those guys who looks very deceiving, chilled out, doesn't look like he's in the best shape. But, he's got a lot of weapons. He's very athletic and very, very good in a lot of areas. Now, he doesn't look that sharp. A lot of his punches sort of came from his waist, as he does a lot. But, it was very impressive the way he stopped Gonzaga. And Gonzaga's been on a tear. He's a dangerous, dangerous guy. And he's really sort of fixed up his boxing a bit and looked a lot better. So I think it was a big win for Matt. The big problem, of course, is when you put Matt against someone who's really in the top in the division, that's when he struggles. And what I want to ask you, Casper, is do you think he struggles mentally when he's versing a guy who's highly touted and when he's looked at as a big underdog going into the fight? Do you think he struggles mentally going into the fights?
To be honest, no, I don't think that's the case. I think that Matt obviously had some glaring problems. One of them was his defense. He's not exactly a guy that's known for getting knocked out. I believe the only time he's ever been knocked out is by Roy Nelson. And that sort of ties in, I think, with the difference between him and Brendan Schaub. Now, Brendan Schaub may have beaten him, but Brendan Schaub's obviously been knocked out like, 4 times now? Some of them being really bad knockouts. Matt Mitrione on the other side, he, A, hasn't lost many fights, and B, even when he loses, I think he's only lost, 1 knockout and a couple of decisions? I think he's only lost 3 times. He lost once to Czech Congo, which was a really, really, really boring fight. He got knocked out by Roy Nelson, and then he got submitted by Brendan Schaub. I think Joe's points were more about concussions and things like that. With Matt Mitrione, I don't think it's really a case of pressure. I just think that, at the time, Czech Congo was a better fighter. I think Roy Nelson, whoever he hits, if he lands cleanly, he's going to knock you out. And he knocked him out with a combination and an uppercut. I don't think anyone saw that coming from Roy Nelson because the guy essentially doesn't seem like he believes in combinations. And then with Brendan Schaub, I think that was a stupid mistake, and Brendan Schaub's improved a lot on the ground. So I think Matt Mitrione, there's a lot of... He sort of was in that hot prospect pile of fighters for a long time, and I think a lot of people have given up on him. First of all, he's a really exciting fighter, and I always like to watch him fight. Whether he's a guy that's going to be champion in the future or not, I don't really care. I love to watch him fight. Again, I don't know that he's necessarily going to be champion, but he did say on the mic afterwards that he's improved a lot and he's tightened up a lot of things. You never know. People have these crazy career resurges. Look at Robbie Lawler. That guy's been fighting forever, and he in Strikeforce didn't even have the greatest of success. He lost to Tim Kennedy and Jake Shields, and he's been back and forth between weight classes. I'm not expecting to see Matt Mitrione go down to light heavyweight, but I think he's got a lot of good tools. He needs to fix those things that he does wrong with his boxing and obviously keeping his hands low. But I'm really excited to see what he does. And just quickly before you have your go, Dennis, with Gabriel Gonzaga, he's a guy who obviously fantastic jiu-jitsu, and then he became a striker, or he, fought like a striker after that crazy knockout over Mirko Krokop. Trains out of Team Link, and then he lost a few, got knocked out. He went back to his roots, focused more on combining the two, both his jiu-jitsu and his striking. And I think even though he's improved a lot with his stand-up, I think he was relying on it a little bit too much. And, he said a few fights ago, I think maybe just prior going back to the UFC, he said, I'm going to go back to what works, and that's my ground. And I think against a guy like Matt Mitrione, I think the blueprint was kind of there. Take him down to the ground, try and submit him, wear him down. He's so goddamn spry, like I said before. You need to take away that pep out of his step. And unfortunately, Gabriel Gonzaga couldn't do that. What did you think, Dennis?
Yeah, I agree with you. So he's beaten Sean Jordan, Derek Lewis, and Gonzaga. I think it's time to give him a name opponent, someone not too high up, but give him somebody pretty well known. Test the guy. He's gotten 3 really good wins. Time to see if he can step up to the plate and fight a guy sort of with a bigger name, sort of with a bigger ranking, and see how he goes. Interesting to see what would happen there.
I'm thinking possibly, I think it's possibly time to make the matchup between Steph and Struve, because they were obviously supposed to fight last, and Steph and Struve had a panic attack. So maybe, Steph and Struve just recently returned. We're going to talk about him because he was the next fight. Maybe make it him versus Stephen Struve. Basically, Stephen Struve lost against Alistair Overeem, but let's be honest, he's coming off a long layoff, a lot of injuries, complications, etc. I'm not taking anything away from Alistair, but it's very hard to come back. Maybe ring rust was a factor. So even though he's lost and Matt's won, I still think it makes sense against to put them two together, or possibly Stipe Miocic. I think
poor Matt Mitrione.
Well, he does. Look, Matt does a lot of things right. We'll talk about that one later.
Yeah. Let's
talk about this Overeem Stephen Struve fight. Leading up into this one, obviously we had Alistair Overeem on the show. You can check out the interview. It's on the channel. You know, and then I think in the last week or so, there was that video circulating of Alistair Overeem saying how he's a mean mofo. And that's pretty much what he looked like in the Stefan Struve fight. I think, you know, we saw that economical Reem, the Conor Reem fighting. He was very, very careful. You know, he didn't get too close to Stefan. I was really happy with the way Overeem fought. And I say that because nobody needed a win more than Alistair Overeem in this case. If he lost to Stefan Struve, that would be... I mean, he talked about possibly retiring if he lost against Frank Mir. I think this would be a similar story. He really needed that win, you know. He took Stefan Struve to the ground, and once he got on there, Jesus, the explosiveness that Alistair Overeem was displaying, it's not like he ever lost it, but sometimes you forget. Sometimes when a guy's a bad performance, you know, and then they come out in the next fight and they really look good. I mean, he knocked him out. Stefan Struve was out cold. For those who think it was technically a TKO, but Stefan Struve was out cold, eyes rolled in the back of the head. What did you think of this one, Dennis?
You know, I gotta say, man, last time Alistair lost, I said, oh, I can't see him winning against anybody in the division. I was pretty down on the guy. When he came out and he took Struve down, I was like, here we go. This is what I wanted. You know, I wanted to see a complete game plan from Alistair Overeem a long time ago through all those losses. So the fact that he took Stefan down, I was like, all right, here we go. You know, use all your areas, you know, use all your attacks. And yeah, he did such an amazing job on the ground with Struve, who's so dangerous off his back. Those legs, when he was doing those up kicks, it was just ridiculous. It was like a guy with two rakes.
Yeah,
and going, hey,
get
back. It was ridiculous. And you know, me and Casper, we've trained with a guy who's 7 foot tall before, and believe you me, when you get down into a guy's guard who's like got legs like that long, it's just like you're like in a boat with a hole in it, and you're slowly sinking in the sea. It's just unbelievable. So Alistair Overeem does an amazing job. Stefan Struve, you know, to give him a bit of credit, he looked pretty good. You know, at the get go, he looked like he was getting his striking going, and you know, he looked like he had a pretty good game plan going in. But yeah, Alistair Overeem does an amazing job. Really good. Really think that he's on the right track, and happy to see him celebrate with his coaches. It looks like he's got a really great relationship there with Greg Jackson. But both guys looked ecstatic when he won, and yeah, really interested to see what kind of Alistair Overeem we'd see next. And again, I'm gonna go for this fight. I'm going to try and get this fight happening because I'm selfish, but I want to see Alistair Overeem fight Mark Hunt in Melbourne in November. Who knows what's going to happen between then? And people are saying that might be Travis Brown fighting Mark Hunt next. But I'd love to see Alistair Overeem fight Mark Hunt in that big stadium show in November. That would be like such a fun fight for the fans. But we'll see what happens between then because it's still a lifetime. But I'd love to see it.
Well, I think the reason why Mark Hunt wants it is because he said he loves rematches. And obviously the first one, Alistair Overeem beat him. And, you know, Mark Hunt's never lost a rematch. So that'd be interesting. You know, Alistair Overeem, I would say this is... I guess it's hard to say because people said this after the Frank Mir fight, but this is probably one of the best Alistair Overeems we've seen. The guy, more than anything, just looked really good mentally. He looked really happy. He looked, even physically, he looked really hard. He looked in good shape. I know that after his failed drug test, there was a few fights where he looked like, you know, he had a little bit more fat than muscle. I just think he looked really good. With Stefan Struve, you're right. I know that we didn't see much from Stefan, but he just looked pretty switched on in that fight until the hammer really came down. And obviously Alistair Overeem, we saw him not cocky. He looked very modest. He looked like he really respected Struve. And he's a guy who obviously got knocked out by Junior Dos Santos and Roy Nelson. So a few years ago, Alistair Overeem would have every reason to come in and show Stefan Struve no respect. Not saying that would be a wise thing, but it wouldn't surprise me. And I think the biggest thing that I took away from this fight, not only did Alistair Overeem look good, but he looked humble. He bowed afterwards. He looked really humble. He was smiling. He was happy. So I'm hoping that attitude carries into his next fight, and I'm very excited to see who he'll fight next.
Absolutely, Cass. You know, it was one of those fight cards where, again, I'm not used to a fight card being so stacked, and Alistair Overeem versus Stefan Struve would have been a usual UFC Fight Night main event, but we progressed to Dos Anjos. How do you say his name? Rafael Dos. Here we go.
I guess it depends where you're from. Rafael Dos Anjos, I think so. I don't know. Angels, okay. Anjos, Dos Anjos, I think is of Angels. Let's just go with that. Rafael Dos Anjos versus Nate Diaz. What did you think of this one, Dennis?
You know, Nate Diaz came overweight into this fight, and in the actual fight itself, he looked like he really felt that ring rust. He looked like he definitely had a few extra pounds on him. He's usually in very good shape. And, you know, I was just absolutely impressed with Rafael. He looked like an absolute beast. Those leg kicks were just brutal. And I felt them just watching him. He just destroyed Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz really had not much to offer. And his boxing didn't look very good. And then Joe Rogan said, you know, due to the leg kicks, you know, he's leaping in and his back foot's up. But at the very start of the fight, he was having trouble making distance, and he was really leaning in a lot and not using his footwork to really get in properly. He was leaning in on his punches a lot, and I wasn't very impressed with Nate Diaz. Again, you know, he's been away for quite some time. He's had all that beef with the UFC, all that stuff happening, and you know, I think Rafael was pretty pissed off because he was overweight. But you know, looking at that fight and judging from that fight, I was just very, very impressed with Rafael, and I was also impressed with Nate Diaz for the fact that he was so tough in taking those leg kicks. I think a lot of people would have tapped out or stopped the fight just because, you know, his leg was absolutely battered. You know, what did you think of the fight?
Yeah, I absolutely have to give it up to Nate Diaz in terms of respect for taking those leg kicks, because those are absolutely brutal. Rafael dos Anjos, he may have been pissed off before about Nate Diaz not making weight, but he's definitely not pissed off now because he's the man who will be getting the next title shot actually against Anthony Pettis. Anthony Pettis texted Dana White afterwards saying, I'm ready, I'm healthy, I want a quick turnaround. I'll take either him or Khabib Nurmagomedov. And Dana White mentioned that because obviously Khabib is not healthy and he's not 100% yet, Rafael dos Anjos is going to get the next title shot. So there you go, boom, that's the next fight made. Now, as far as this fight against Nate Diaz, it was a great game plan, and he mentioned, obviously, I think in the post-fight speech, that he's noticed Nate Diaz never checks leg kicks, so he's going to attack the crap out of his leg. And that's exactly what he did. Thoroughly impressed. I mean, that's, what, 4 in a row for Rafael dos Anjos. He's been really impressive. I think ever since he beat Donald Cerrone, 3 in a row. Ever since he beat Donald Cerrone, I think everybody kind of woke up and went, whoa, this guy just beat Donald Cerrone, who was on a really big tear. And just having a look at his record, he had 5 wins in a row before he lost to Khabib Nurmagomedov, and then he had 3 wins. So obviously Jason High, Benson Henderson, that was another big holy shit moment, and then Nate Diaz now. So I mean, the dude is definitely elite. He's been around for a long time, but he's changed a lot of things in his game. I can still remember UFC 117 when he versed Clay Guida. Clay Guida got on top of him, and he had that jaw injury. And it's one of those ones where you look at him and go, oh, like, you know, what's next for this guy? Where's he going to go in the division? Here he is now. I think, 4 years? UFC 117, I think that was 2010. 4 years later, and now he's truly evolved, and he's going to be fighting for the title. Really impressed with this guy. In terms of Nate Diaz, man, it really sucks for him because, like you said, he had this long beef with the UFC. He sat out for, I think all year pretty much. I don't think he's fought at all since that Gray Maynard fight. And now he's you know, he lost. He didn't get that raise that he wanted. You know, all he really got was a fight against a guy who would possibly be fighting, or you know, for the title next. And he's lost that one, so he's no closer to fighting for the title. He didn't get a raise, and now the Reebok uniform's coming in. I'm not saying I feel bad for Nate Diaz, but he's just in a really crappy position.
Yeah, that's right. You know, just quickly, you know, the Diaz brothers, they have great boxing, but what I'm worried about the most in that situation is the fact that, you know, they focus a lot on their boxing and not enough on their kicking. I'm worried that in the Anderson Silva-Nick Diaz fight, Anderson's going to look at that fight that Nate had and really utilize his leg kicks as well. And the other thing is, I think it's one of the things that really gets the brothers, the fact that when they verse a guy who can kick well, because they don't kick very often in their fights and they use boxing mostly, I think it holds them back. So what I'd like to see, and again, we just have a show, we're not MMA trainers, but what I'd love to see is Nate Diaz and Nick Diaz utilize kicking more, because they have long legs. They seem like they'd be great at it. And their boxing is really focused on their footwork and planting their feet down a lot of the time, moving around. And I think any guy with great kicks can utilize a game plan like Dos Anjos did and, you know, really stop them in their tracks. So it is mixed martial arts. So you have to be good in all areas. And sometimes, you know, traditional boxing just can't keep up with a guy that kicks really, really well.
Yeah, you know, get the gams involved. But you're right, it's tough. Like, when you're the Diaz brothers and you are so good at boxing and you have that style that you've been doing for, you know, years and years and years and essentially your whole career, it's very tough to implement something brand new. And it's funny because we say that, and yet Rafael dos Anjos has improved a lot, you know. I don't think wrestling was ever a big thing for him. He had, you know, he was good on the ground and he had decent striking, but he's incorporated wrestling a lot, and that's a big reason why he's so lethal now. I just don't really see that coming from the Diaz brothers. I don't think that they're all of a sudden going to become kickboxers. Let's talk. I think we've been talking for a while. Let's talk about this Junior Dos Santos and Stipe Miocic fight, and then call it a show. What did you think of this fight, Dennis?
You know, it was a very exciting matchup. Stipe was on our show. I got to say, Stipe is such a great guy. I think he's one of those, you know, genuinely really cool guys. You know, he works as a firefighter, told us about how he saved, you know, a woman's life. He's just an amazing guy. And it's great to see the UFC shine a bit of spotlight on, you know, who he really is and doing a few packages about his life. Thought the fight was, you know, good, but, you know, Junior just edged him out. He looked great. Junior Dos Santos looked great. He looks very hungry. And I think he realizes that, you know, the title scene, especially with Fabricio Verdum, a guy that he's beaten fighting for the title, I think he realizes he's got a good opportunity to pop back in there. And if, you know, Verdum has an opportunity and actually beats Kane, I think he realizes he can slot right in there and get a title shot, you know, very, very soon. So it was a very good back and forth fight. What did you think, Cass?
Yeah, look, back and forth is the word I would use. I saw some people on the internet using the word epic, and I definitely don't agree with that. I don't think it was the greatest fight in the world, to be honest. I think some parts were a little bit underwhelming. I was very, very impressed with Stipe because I thought Junior Dos Santos was a really, really tough test. Obviously, prior to Kane, Junior Dos Santos was going in there and just absolutely destroying guys. And, you know, Stipe Miocic really, really took it to him. And I think in the first round, I saw, I don't know, was it just me or did Junior Dos Santos look really, really slow? Like, he just looked like he was moving in slow motion. I thought, damn, like, is this ring rust? Like, what happened? He just, I don't know, just he looked really big. He looked huge. He looked jacked. He didn't really seem all that explosive. I don't think Junior actually woke up until, say, halfway through the third round when he dropped Stipe. I think that's when he started to get loose, started getting comfortable. Maybe it was ring rust. I don't know what it was. But the first two rounds, I definitely wasn't impressed with Junior Dos Santos at all. And this is a guy who, you know, we've said this before. We've spoken to, who was it? We spoke to Joseph Benavidez before about being in that Junior Dos Santos territory where you've lost to the champ already twice. You need to make a big statement. And Junior Dos Santos, I don't think he made that statement at all. I think he went up against a guy who has a similar style to Cain Velasquez, sort of, in the sense that he's, you know, a wrestler, striker. But I think Stipe Miocic definitely isn't there with Cain Velasquez. He doesn't have the cardio. As we saw, he didn't have it after the third round. And if Junior Dos Santos can, you know, edge out a guy like Stipe, there's no way he's ready to beat a guy like Cain Velasquez. And he also made a lot of the same mistakes that he made against Cain Velasquez. He made them against Stipe, which is backing up in a straight line and getting caught against the cage. And at the moment, I'll be honest with you, I have zero interest whatsoever in seeing another fight against Junior Dos Santos and Cain Velasquez, because from what we saw against from Junior in this fight, I think it would play out exactly the same as the last fight. I mean, you never know how Cain Velasquez is. Obviously, he's got his injuries and things like that. Those can change a guy's career. But I don't know. I'm happy for Junior. I'm glad he's back. He's been out of action for so long, and I think he's a great fighter for the UFC, and I always look forward to it towards his fights. I just thought it was a little bit underwhelming, to be honest.
And, you know, good on Stipe for getting in there and really showing his heart and getting some good experience in. I think a lot of the times a fight like that really grows someone as a fighter. Being in there with a guy like Junior Dos Santos and hanging in there, I think that we'll see a bit of Stipe in his next matchup, and he'll really learn from this fight. So good on him. And, you know, I agree with you, man. Junior Dos Santos versus Cain Velasquez. Don't know if I'm that excited about it, but would you be interested in seeing Junior Dos Santos versus Fabricio Verdum? Because that could be a possibility too.
I thought you were going to say something else. Yeah, no, I would. And I would probably, you know, if you asked me that a year or two ago, I would say, oh man, Dos Santos will smash him. And now, you know, I think Fabricio Verdum has looked absolutely phenomenal. I would be interested in a rematch, absolutely. I mean, the way Junior Dos Santos came in at UFC 90, for those who don't know the story, basically, Fabricio Verdum opened up as the heavy favorite, and then there was a video, right? It was one of those like little blogs before UFC embedded, before there was the, you know, Dana White vlog every, you know, day it seems. There was one where he went backstage and there was a video of Junior Dos Santos hitting pads, and after that video people went, holy shit, and Vegas turned around the odds. I can't remember exactly how they went, but basically Fabricio Verdum wasn't nearly the favorite. He may have even been the underdog. Anyway, brutal knockout in the first round. I think it was a lot to do with Fabricio underestimating this guy who was just making his debut. And I think at that point, Fabricio was pretty close to a title shot anyway. So yeah, there's a great story in there for those two guys. Have done a lot in their careers since a rematch. I think that'd be great. I thought you were going to say Junior Dos Santos versus another guy who recently won, and that's Alistair Overeem.
Ooh.
That's a fight.
I like watching Alistair Overeem win. So I don't know. Again, here we go. And Alistair Overeem's going to listen to the show one day, and I think he's coming down to Australia soon, and he's going to give me a slap.
He's going to kick you in the leg, man. You're going to have one leg. Get used to that.
Who knows? He might even try and take me down now because he's got the full game plan going. But I'll tell you what. Hey, I would watch that fight. If I'm the UFC, though, I'd probably give Alistair another couple of... then again, what? Mark Hunt, that's a gimme fight? Come on, that's a tough fight for Alistair.
Yeah.
As well. But then I'm being selfish, and I want to see him in Melbourne in the huge, 50,000 plus at Etihad Stadium. So, yeah, that's a great fight. There's a lot of great fights for Junior Dos Santos. Yeah,
Ben Rothwell. Junior Dos Santos and Ben Rothwell. Ben Rothwell.
That's a good fight. That's a good freaking fight.
I mean, he said that's who he wants. He wants either Junior or Cain Velasquez. I actually think that might... Prediction right here in Submission Radio. I think that's the fight that they're going to make. It's either going to be him or Alistair Overeem, because obviously Fabrizio Verdum, he's going to fight Cain. He deserves it. There's no way they're just going to give him someone who's not the champion. I think it's going to be Alistair Overeem or Ben Rothwell or Matt Mitrione or someone else in the heavyweight division. So it's very...
Hey, what's going on with Ben Rothwell? How come he doesn't have a fight yet? Like, he had that really good win. Was he injured or something?
Yeah.
What's going on with him?
Yeah, he said on Ariel's show that he was injured. So he didn't.
Okay.
Yeah, he said that he was injured, and that's why. Because you're right, it doesn't make sense, right? He beat Overeem, and yet Overeem's fighting. His fight's not even announced. He's injured, but I honestly think it's going to be Junior Dos Santos and Ben Rothwell. That's my prediction. I don't think they're going to give him Matt Mitrione. He's too low in the pecking order, and I think they want to bring Alistair Overeem up, slowly. I think they're going to do Ben Rothwell versus Junior Dos Santos.
Imagine they do Alistair Overeem versus Matt Mitrione.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting one.
They look at the cards. They go, all right, we're going to give Matt like a guy that's well known and give him another crack. But I mean, Overeem, I don't know. But imagine, they give him Alistair Overeem. That would be an interesting fight, I guess.
There's a story there as well, because with Mitrione, he is part of the Black Zillions, and Overeem, everybody knows the story there.
That's a good story, yeah. So that's a good freaking story. So it's
marketable. But Matt Mitrione, what if he knocks out Alistair Overeem? I think given how much they're spending on Alistair Overeem, they want it to pay off. Then they're going to give him low-risk fighters. I don't know who that is. I don't know if there's any more, ground fighters in there that they can give him. I have no idea. Look,
yeah, I think Matt Mitrione probably has a good chance of beating Alistair Overeem. I think you're right. So, yeah, there's a risk there. Interesting. Tough to be a matchmaker in the UFC these days. I think that's enough said in that area.
Yeah, for another week, we're just going to remain hosts of a show. We're not quite ready to be UFC matchmakers or even local fight scene matchmakers. That's it for another week from us, guys. Just want to say a big thank you to our guests. Ben Askren, Ken Shamrock, and of course the fantastic TJ Dillashaw. Not to say that the other guys aren't fantastic. We really appreciate having them on the show. That's it from us for another week. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. Other sort of news, we are on SoundCloud as well. If you didn't catch that earlier, SoundCloud officially on there. So iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, SoundCloud. We're basically everywhere. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter @SubmissionAUS. Dennis, any last words for the fans?
Yeah, just two things. Number one, guys, check out our interview with CB Dollaway. It happened last week, and he spoke about beating Lyoto Machida and finishing him. And I don't think that interview got enough of a, I'll be honest with you, Casper, I don't think that interview got enough of a spotlight because it sort of came out, UFC 181 was happening. It's tough for a lot of these fans. A lot of stuff's happening. We know better than anyone else. But now that it's sort of dying down and he's about to fight, guys, I don't think you've heard of CB Dollaway like this before. So make sure you check this out. And number two, we're on SoundCloud. Is there anywhere else you guys want to hear us? If you got any ideas and you want to see Submission Radio on another sort of network like a SoundCloud or a Stitch or something like that, make sure to write into us. Cass, what's the best email for them to contact us on?
info@submissionradio.com. Send that through. Like if you're in Russia or like if you're in Finland and there's some kind of like Finnish, podcast website that we haven't heard of, let us know. We'll put the show up there just for you, just for our Finnish fans.
Yeah, they have a great thing going there, the Finnish fans. So, yeah, thanks for everybody who listens. And apart from that, Cass, I think that's it. And another exciting week of fights. Our last show next week, we will take a break for a week after that. So you guys have to make sure you tune in because we have an exciting show planned for you guys.
when you say our last show, just for the year. So we'll be covering, obviously, UFC Fight Night 58, CBWA versus Machida. We'll be taking one cheeky week break, and then we'll be back the following week so that we can cover UFC 182. The channel's not going anywhere. There'll still be Technique of the Week. We've got some really, really, really good techniques coming up. I don't want to hype anything up, but they will be surrounding UFC 182. That's all I'm going to say at the moment. We got some really sick techniques, someone that you've never seen anything from before. They revolve around those fighters. So check that out. There'll be more things on the channel. Till then, guys, we'll catch you next week.